nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone to our October 19th Select Board meeting. We've got a pretty good crowd here, so when we get to it, just remember that if you'd like to speak, to come up to the microphone and give your name before you speak so everybody can hear you here, and out on Zoom too. We have two Select Board members that are attending on Zoom, Heather Chase and Lee Dakin, and one of our Select Board members is in training, I believe, out Midwest somewhere.
California.
For the fire department.
Yeah.
So there'll just be two here and two on Zoom. The first item on the agenda is to approve our minutes from our October 5th meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the October 5, 2022 meeting.
I'll second that.
Lee's the motion and Heather is the second. Any changes, corrections, omissions, errors, anything on the minutes?
Not at this time.
Just wanted to add that under visitors present, Jim Goodfellow is listed, but not Susan Goodfellow. She was also attending via Zoom.
Thanks, Lee. Lee, you okay with the minutes? She was on there, wasn't she?
She was.
I had seen the
She was, but you still have a quorum, so you can continue.
Heather, stick with us. We lose you and the meeting's over. Maybe she'll be back on.
I'm here. I'm here.
Thanks, Heather. All those in favor of approving the minutes with the correction, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is citizens' comments. If there is someone here that would like to address the board regarding an issue that is not on the agenda, now would be the time to do so. Are there any citizens' comments?
You have one on Zoom.
I can't see it. Where am I looking?
On Zoom?
Can you
Randy.
Randy.
It says Randy.
go ahead, Randy?
Thank you very much. I'm Randy Schoonmaker from Southeast Vermont Transit. We're the public transit operator in the region, and I wanted to just let the select board know briefly, we're contemplating a route change in Chester. I sent a presentation to Julie earlier, which I'm sure she's shared with you, but just wanted to let you know that the Route 61 that we run through Chester daily in the wintertime, we're gonna use those hours and that funding at Okemo to run a route there this year. But the Route 57 that we run Monday through Friday, we're gonna run that through Chester, and we're gonna run that every weekend day in the middle of the winter, plus year-round through Chester. So Chester won't be served by the 61, it'll be served by the 57, and there'll be a year-round presence of public transit per our proposal. So we hope that that's good news to Chester. We appreciate very much the contributions you've made to our company over the years. We wanted to give everybody.
Can't hear.
Can the select board hear me?
Yeah, it was just someone else on Zoom, I guess, their microphone. If you're not speaking on Zoom, can you make sure that your microphones are muted? Go ahead, Randy.
See him, can't hear him.
So I just wanted to say, if you have any questions, the information is all on the handout that I sent to Julie. Mover.com is our website. There's additional information there, and you can contact me directly. My information, again, is with Julie, but we want to thank the select board and the town for all their support, and we hope that this is going to be good news and more service to your community.
Thank you, Randy. I appreciate it. It's, I think it's always a good sign when we can get some more bus service through town. I'm just curious, is it used a lot in the past? Has it been with the ridership?
There was a point 4 or 5 years ago we would do 11 or 1,200 rides. And the route that you have goes from Bellows Falls, Springfield, Chester to Okemo. Last year, we did less than 500 rides, so it was not productive at all. And both the 57 and the 61 followed almost the same path from Bellows Falls to Rockingham, to Okemo, so it was really a duplication of effort. So we'll get a lot more rides in Ludlow with one route, and we'll get a lot more service to Chester and more rides with the other.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you, and thanks again for your support.
Are there any other citizens' comments? You're going to have to come up to the microphone, Josh, give your name, and speak up here so we could all hear you.
Sure thing. Oh, perfect. Where's the camera?
Back.
Oh, it's back there. Can everybody hear me? All right, good. I can certainly hear myself. Okay, so my name's Josh Schroeder. I live just down the street, town of Chester. I'm on the Green Mountain Unified School District School Board, and I'm here to kind of enlighten, inform briefly about the renovations that we're about to propose. So we've got a bond proposal. We've worked on it for the last 2 or 3 years. I don't know if anybody in Zoom land or is here is familiar with this, but essentially the bond mainly focuses on the local high school here in Chester. There's about $16 million in renovations that we're proposing to push forward through there. Also the 2 elementary schools that this school district supports, Cavendish Town Elementary, and then right here, Chester Andover. So, being a citizen in Chester, I have also a son who goes to Green Mountain. He's a freshman, really involved in the community, and being on the school board has been awesome. It gives me this opportunity to kind of bring this forward. So, while it's a large chunk of money, we're looking at close to $20 million. I'm going to highlight just a few of the areas that are what I feel are pretty important. So focusing mainly on the high school, built in 1970, 71, we're looking at 50 years old. So over the past 50 years, it's been maintained at a superbly high level. So I'm really, really impressed. And I can say that because that has been my background since I was 13 years old. I have been a facility manager in some way, shape, or form for literally most of my life. At a very high level, and also started, very, very low. So I can see good maintenance. I understand what that means, understand what goes into that, and I understand that good maintenance creates a long-lasting building, which is what we have. Now, good maintenance can only go so far. We also have technological improvements over the years, and, well, Green Mountain hasn't used any of those. In fact, that's good news, because what that means is that in 1985, when those systems from 1970 were put in, we're now not wasting that money, right? We didn't do all those improvements in 85, 87, 89. We just moved along. Well, 99 came, so now we're at 20, 30 years into the building. We decided to move along again. We've done small upgrades and improvements to keep things moving and fixed, but now we're at a point where we're at a significant end-of-life scenario. What that means is that a lot of the systems, mechanical systems, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, windows, basically most of the environmental systems and life safety systems, electrical systems, are all now outdated. So now we're kind of just throwing money at bad product. And at this point, our maintenance costs are increasing. Our facility operational costs are increasing. And so now it's time, we look at this, we look at a 50-year-old home. Hopefully we're all homeowners here. We look at a 50-year-old home and we think, well, it's probably time to upgrade this and upgrade that. So now we're looking at a 50-year-old building, which houses, hopefully, the future of our lovely community. And we want to think about what areas we may want to pick and choose to repair. So while the main focus is heating and ventilation, we also are looking at replacing the windows in the high school, those controls upgrades. We want to upgrade that kitchen. We want to upgrade those electrical transformers. Some of these improvements give us a rebate. You know, I was looking at about $85,000 in rebates annually in costs, you know, operational costs. Some of them are just nice to haves. The ceilings, we want to paint them. We want to remove the asbestos that's in there. We want to remove the asbestos flooring that's in there. We want to upgrade the lights. Essentially, if you watch the video, if you go online, go to trsu.org, you'll be able to see a lot of the videos. They're very informative, and they give you even more information than I am now. You get some student bios on there. They talk about, you know, one class they wear a down jacket because it's, you know, 65 and cooler. In the other class, they got to take it off. There's really no way to control the rooms individually in that space. So essentially, I believe with my experience that it's time we do something. And right now, really probably is the time. We want to improve the elevator. Please go on the website, look it up. See it. Todd's going to pass out some papers for those that may have questions. We can't answer questions now because it's just me just speaking up here. But we do plan to be on the agenda for November 2nd for some more questions, which is just before the vote, November 8th. Touch on Chester Andover because that's obviously near and dear to our heart. That's where the little ones go. Similar stuff. We want to replace those sub panels. There's a lot of them, and they're in pretty poor shape. We want to improve the fire alarm. We want to improve that lighting. We're going to do conversion from oil to propane. We all know what oil prices are now. We all know they're going up. We all know where propane prices are. We all know those are going up, but at a less rate. But stuff's going up, and it's going to cost a lot of money. And it's probably time to make the move. For those that drive through the town of Chester when the school drop-off is going on, it can be chaotic, it can be unsafe. We've got some improvements designed in there to try and help with that. And a big money item is the window upgrade. The windows, most of these areas are not up to code, so we want to bring those up to code, and what I mean by that is egress. We want to be able to allow folks to be able to, well, little folks, be able to get out in the case of a blocked exit, fire, something like that. So essentially, while we're focused on efficiency, we're also, main focus is life safety of the children, teachers and staff that are all working hard. Cavendish Town, very similar. The school's a little bit better shape, but we do want to upgrade the heating system. We want to change that. We want to upgrade the fire alarm. We want to give those folks a really decent playground to play on. It's pretty bad if you haven't, not many of you probably go to the school grounds, but if you do, check it out. It's pretty unsafe. And they're working on some fundraising campaigns there too. So I think I've probably taken my allotted time. I know I can't answer any questions, but we can, my email's on the website. You can email me. I can give you my phone number, 603-313-4448. I've had the number for years, so don't judge me on the prefix 603. Years, ever since I was about, well, cell phones came out. Anyway, I can turn it over to Todd, unless, Todd, is there anything that you want to touch on? So Todd is the facilities director for the TRSU, and he's been very, very close to this project, if you wouldn't imagine.
Hey, thanks, Josh. I'm Todd Para. I'm a resident of Chester as well. Josh did a pretty good job of relaying the message. I just want to touch on a couple of things. Everybody should be receiving a mailer from the supervisory union with a brief description of what the bond is about. We're going to have a walkthrough at the high school on October 27th. Anybody and everybody's welcome to come. I'll probably be giving the tours myself. And then we're going to have an informational meeting at the high school as well, and we can set up tours of the elementary schools. A couple of things that I wanted to touch on was we put together, the AOE, Agency of Education, had put together a school facility inventory assessment report. And that report was for, I believe, 305 schools. Ours rated somewhere around 7, 8, or 9 as, and most major heating and ventilating systems were depleted or at end of life. So we've waited for years and kept our schools put together, and we probably should have went out to bond a couple, 2 or 3 times in the past 50 years, and we've done some upgrades at the elementary school. The high school's had a new roof, and that's about the extent of it. They put a new boiler in 1988. So we're really at that spot where it's going to come to the point where it's not an ask, it's an actual need. So we understand that it's a lot of money. We're asking people to please vote informed. You know, we want to make sure that everybody knows what we're doing and what we've been working on. And as Josh said, we're going to try to get on the agenda for November 2nd. And that way there, people have questions and we can answer questions, or please feel free to come to the school on November 1st, and you'll be getting that mailer from the supervisory union. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. I just want to reiterate how important it is, if you're on this question and the amount of money that's being spent, that we make sure we do our homework on this, do the research, find out what we're voting about, find out what conditions they are at the school, and the important thing is make sure you vote. And I gave you a little leeway on the citizens' comments. Usually they're a little shorter, but we're more than happy to put you on the agenda. It'll be a couple of days or the week before the vote, in which case, when you're on the agenda, we can have people ask questions and have a back and forth on it to get the information out there, because I think it is very important on it for the town. Those schools have, like you stated, they've been kept up and kept going all these years, but they're hurting in a lot of ways, and they really have to come into the 21st century in a big way too. So hopefully the town and the people are behind this, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks then, when we could actually ask some questions and have a conversation about it. Appreciate you coming tonight to at least get the word out there so people are aware of it. Thanks again.
Todd, real quick, what time is the walkthrough on the 27th?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay. Just, I'll have the girls at the front office tell people when they come in. Okay.
Bill?
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that you address the ballot issue situation, as we had mail-out ballots, and many of the people who had pre-voted and sent in their ballots did not receive the ballot for this.
Arnie, I can't hear. Can we have Bill speak into the speaker, please?
Yeah, hang in there, Sue. Yep.
Thank you. I'll start over again. Because we had a mail-out ballot situation, many people did not receive a ballot for this project. They pre-voted already, and they're unaware that to get a vote, they will have to come to the town hall to pick up a ballot if they wish to vote. So I think that should be made known to a lot of people, because this is a large money issue. I guess we're not taking any questions about that tonight, so I'll reserve my time for addressing some of these issues. This is a very important issue. The town of Chester has just completed several lovely buildings. That tax bill, so to speak, is in your bill as it comes along. This is going to add a large amount of money, and I think all voters should participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Is there anyone else for citizens' comments? There's nobody on Zoom, I can't see.
I don't see any yellow hands.
Excuse me, Arnie, there are 2 Susans on Zoom, and I know the one Susan's last name. I asked her. The other Susan, I don't know her last name.
Victor, that's one you're missing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Did you get
Thank
that?
you.
And it looks like Steve had his hand up. I'm not sure, it's not showing now, but.
Steve, do you have your hand up there?
Yes, sir, I do have a comment.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, when you get into your housing discussion here, I want you to consider that it's all about our infrastructure, Arnie. And the people on the Planning Commission have done a lot of legwork, a lot of it, and they should be applauded for their legwork. for defining infrastructure, I mean, it just borders on archaeology, for lack of a better term. And any aspirations your town has, or the board has, or the taxpayer has, the foundational issue is going to be the infrastructure to support it. So I feel that's just, they've done a great job for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, and hopefully you could stick around for the housing discussion, and a few of the other items on the agenda are regarding the infrastructure on the town, so we will be speaking to those issues a little later on. Thank you, Steve.
Yes, sir.
I can't see any hands from here on.
No, I don't see any.
Clear? Thanks. The next item is old business. Julie, can you take us through our old business list?
I can. Excuse me, there are several items. The charging station billing, people may not know that the charging stations down on Colby Street have, as part of the grant agreement to construct those, required a couple of years of free charging capabilities. So we are well beyond our 2 years. We're actually into 3 years. So we will now begin billing. That billing will start November 1st. We have notices up on those units, so we just want to get the word out. If you have been accustomed to free electric vehicle charging, it ends. Get them charged before end of October 31st. Just an update on the two property cleanups we were dealing with. First one being the property on Amston Hill Road. Due to some interesting circumstances, the property owner came forward and has decided that she would like to keep the property, not go through this program. They are making a strong effort to clean up the property on their own, which is great. So we will not be going through that program with that particular property. Update on the property on Cummings Road. No movement. We are just waiting an appropriate period of time, which we think it should be a minimum of 90 days before we proceed with attempting to enforce the health order more than has already happened. So the property has been barricaded, the access has been barricaded. That issue we have resolved, but before cleanup can begin, and there's a lot to learn about, we don't want to take on that responsibility. So there's a lot to learn about that process, but we need to give it a good 90 days before we continue. So just to keep you in the loop.
On that Amsden Hill property, was there ever an assessment as far as environmental thing goes, that step one or step two?
They did the phase one. I have not yet seen the report. They did the review for phase one. I have not seen the report, but I have notified them, just because I don't want them to keep spending money. So, or to keep, and it's state money. It's not our money, but still, right? It's our money, right? So, police chief search, just an update on that. I have received 4 applications to date. We have extended it. We included it in the ICMA, the International Chiefs Organization. But we do have 4 applications, and we've, like I said, extended that to October 28th. So I'll keep you updated on that. Fire truck grant, for those who don't know, the town of Chester was awarded a $475,000 grant for the purchase of our new tanker, which is long overdue. Matt, Ben, Steve, and a couple of other guys from the fire department formed a committee, went out to bid. They had 6 vendors interested, 4 submitted bids. We had a meeting this week, reviewed those bids, and looks like we will be going with E1. Came in the lowest, actually was able to come in at a little under the 475, which was great. And we were able to get the larger engine, which is what we wanted. The only thing that will put it over slightly is all vehicle purchases are now putting in a $15,000 contingency. That's required in case of price increases. Understandable. So that puts it slightly over. That puts it, the bid is 473, 491 plus the 15,000, puts it at 488. And if we don't need the contingency, which I'm sure they will. Then we get the money back. Any questions on the fire truck? Okay. The committee did a tremendous job getting a truck in today's economy at the price that was estimated a year and a half ago. So that was,
It is quite a feat.
that was pretty amazing. They did a really great job.
I agree.
Yeah. Grants, quick update on grants. So we were awarded a $35,000 grant from Firehouse Subs for the purchase of ambulance and fire equipment. So that will not have to hit the budget in 2023.
So when a grant like that comes through, is that for new equipment or is it replacing old equipment?
So this particular grant, number one, is replacing old equipment, but it is also providing turnout gear for a certain number of ambulance employees. So currently, if our ambulance responds to a car accident, they cannot enter the vehicle to treat the patient because they don't have the proper gear. And getting ambulance people, getting EMTs that gear through a grant just doesn't happen. You just can't seem to get it covered. So the Firehouse Subs grant did. So we were able to get, I think it's 7 sets of turnout gear for the ambulance personnel. We were awarded the Better Back Roads grant for the work on Lover's Lane. And FEMA has a grant opened up, unheard of. The match is only going to be 10%. Normally FEMA is a minimum of 25, sometimes close to 50%. This will be for the purchase, hopefully, the purchase of the generator of the Jeffrey Well site, which has been long overdue. Naomi will be helping me on the BCA for that. In addition, we're going to be applying for funds, since it is low match, for the remaining construction work of Route 35. Which is, we've been plugging away at a little at a time, so hopefully that would.
It's an expensive road.
It's a very expensive road.
Because of the condition of that road
Yeah.
and the shape it's been in over the years and the way it was originally built, it's been reconstructed from the ground up.
Yes.
And being next to a river, it's been extremely expensive per mile on that road.
Yes. Yep, hopefully what we've been doing will resolve the issues. And then just a quick update on the Academy building. So Brookside Bridge is just about done, and if you haven't been out there, I really recommend you go. Looks just amazing. But anyway, we've been talking about access to that bridge, how to get there. If you have ever been to the Academy building in the wintertime and watched the ice slide off that slope, it is treacherous. So I have been very hesitant to put pedestrians under that eave to access the Brookside Trail. So we now have a facilities director, so Steve again did some research and looked into and talked with the roofers that just replaced that slope. And what they have come up with are
Snow breaks.
yeah, snow breaks. Is that what they call them? Snow breaks.
something like
Yeah. The $10,860 would do both sides, would do both eaves, would block the snow and the ice, more importantly. The other advantage is every year, at least once, when that ice sheds, it often does damage to that abutting barn that's there. So it would also prevent that issue. So I'll be coming to you probably at the next meeting with an actual funding request, but that's what we are looking at this time. Otherwise, the only other option would be on the side of the Academy building that abuts the cemetery, would be to reconstruct. There used to be a roof there years ago.
Some old pictures.
Some old pictures of when that was still a school. The concern is the ice would then come off the roof, hit that lower roof, and then would catapult and take out the old cemetery stones. So we really don't want to do that either. So
Doesn't sound like a good plan.
it doesn't sound like a good plan. The only other access would be if we were to access people through the cemetery, but then it's encouraging people to maybe walk over, grave sites to get to the trail, and that's just not a good idea either. So I think it's snow guards it is, or whatever you call them.
So when they consider that, do they have to consider the weight or any engineering issues or the structure of the building that it could take all that? Because it does hold back on.
Yeah, the roofer felt that because he was just up there, that he felt that the structure there would support this.
But Julie, the one question I had on that, and this is Lee.
Go ahead.
The one question I had about that, I was trying to visualize the snowpack building up, building up, building up. It has to come off sometime.
Mm-hmm.
So I was concerned, by having a place where it couldn't. I mean, it would back up and back up. How does it release itself on the side of the academy that goes back into the backyard, if you will, without damaging the roof by the weight that it's going to handle? I really got confused on that.
What I have been told by Steve is that on sunny days, that gradually starts to melt, and melts away, and then new snow comes. I mean, I can certainly get more details, and I can certainly have Steve come to the next meeting. Anybody who knows me knows that I am not the one.
Yeah, I was just a little confused, because sometimes we get piles of snow and no thawing for a month or two.
And I don't
So
think
just-
these guards are not guards that block feet of snow. I mean,
Okay,
eventually if the snow gets a certain height, it is still going to come off.
okay,
But it's not going to be sliding down sheer slate. So it's not going to be
Okay.
coming down at the momentum that it would be.
okay, great, thank you.
And I value the opinion of that roofing
Absolutely.
gentleman and stuff, but
Yeah.
maybe just some verification
Sure.
on how it all kind of works
Sure.
and stuff.
Yep, I can do that. That's it
Good.
for all business. That's enough.
Cheryl? This is under old business still. Go ahead. You got to pick it up. There
Got
you
it.
go.
Hello. Cheryl Lipton. So I know, I'm not sure what kind of a right-of-way it is, but there is a right-of-way also that is between two other buildings to lead back there. And I don't know if you want to not even think about that. It would be way cheaper to just have a path on the right-of-way, but it is between two other buildings.
There is a right-of-way between two other buildings. We would have to remove trees in neighbors' yards. So I did not consider that as an option. It would be very disruptive to come between those two properties, because we would have to be establishing the right-of-way. It is there, but we'd have to actually make the path.
Thank you, Cheryl. Any board members have anything on old business?
I have nothing.
Lee?
I have nothing. No, I have nothing, thank you.
You all set?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is an update from the Chester Garden and Greenhouse Committee. I think Cheryl Joy Lipton is here to give us that update. Back up.
Yep, Cheryl Joy Lipton. The community garden, we wanted to start, get approval for starting on the Canal Street property, town property. And we actually have gotten the names of 165 supporters at least, more that are not on our list yet, and at least 125 of them are within Chester. And again, there are more on other lists. So there are more people that support us than have signed the statement that they support the gardens. And once the gardens have started, I think that there will be many more in support. This is not to say that everyone will be gardening there or having a plot, but there are enough already supporting that are greatly looking forward to being able to have a garden plot there on the site. So this is a project that is a community building thing, and many people support that. It's for the whole town, not just for a handful of people in the town. So I also, in talking to a lot of different people, found that Some of the previous uses were, for that very site were a carnival. The carnival came a couple of times to that site. People have been riding their dirt bikes back there. Kids, teens, young adults hanging out. Skating rink for a bunch of years. So gardening is not even close to as rowdy as any of those things. It's pretty gentle and quiet. I talked to people that were, not just me and a few others on our board went around and talked to some of the people that are abutting the property. So I spoke to 9 people that are in favor of it, or that are fine with it. 2 are not against it. 6 of them are very much in favor of it. And, Julie and I talked about this, and one person I decided not to bug her because she's asked to stop having correspondence because she's fine with it. So she just doesn't want to, so I didn't think I should go and knock on her door. One of the abutters is even just really far away and really not an actual, legally they're abutting, but they're on the other side of the river, beyond a forest, and up a hill, so really they're not right there. So another issue that we were talking about before was that in case we have to turn it back into a lawn, that will be very easy, and we have money already now in reserve in order to turn it back into lawn in case the garden plots are not wanted anymore. And it's really about $80 to $100 and something for, I don't have it right here. It's not expensive. And, we're going to use our own labor and volunteers to put the gardens in. We'll use our own labor and volunteers to take the gardens out if necessary. We have assets in excess of $60,000 to $80,000, and there won't be a problem with turning it back into a mowed lawn if necessary. So I just think that it's a really positive community building project, and I believe that it's town land and it's a thing for the whole town, and a lot of people are really looking forward to it. So I'm hoping somebody else wants to say something about that.
Thank you for that update, Cheryl. Appreciate it. I know the one thing that we're waiting for on the board is the survey.
So
that was a big item.
Yep, I heard from Gary this week, if you want an update.
Yep.
Okay, so I heard from Gary this week, and he is anticipating he's going to go walk it first, come back to me with a price. And Arnie, he knew that you wanted to walk it with him, so he'll reach out to you directly. And doesn't feel that it would take much to survey it. He has the old survey. It would just be updating. So I should have a number from him anytime, and then he'll just get going, so. Yeah.
That would have helped at least define the perimeter of the area and stuff and how it affects what's going on around there.
That's good to know. I would love to be able to be involved also, or somebody on the board might want to do that. I do want to say that will not have, I don't think that really should have bearing on approval or not. It just has bearing on the design details of the gardens. So it's a 3-acre lot. Approximately, give or take, whatever, and it just has bearing on exactly what happens on the edges.
So is there anyone here else that has any questions or concerns or would like to make any comments regarding this project while we're here and it's on the agenda?
Jeff Holden, Water Superintendent. Just a couple of things. I think it's great for a community project, but as far as I know, this is still listed as emergency backup well, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. emergency backup well. If something happens to our main well, and we only have one, that's supposed to take up, we'd have to issue a boil water order and hook the pipes back up and pump. But, and it doesn't, the big problem with it is it doesn't have the capacity that we're using now. But if it becomes a dire emergency and something happens and we have to pump water, we can conserve water and use it, and it may get us a little while longer. But I just want to make sure that we don't get ahead of ourselves there. We're trying to secure a second redundant well before we do away with the emergency backup, because we still got to, it is drinking water.
It is. We are allowed to have in the gardens on top of that. What cannot happen is any form of chemical.
Right.
Right.
But
So
I'm
that
just a
would
little
just have to
concerned.
be- I know.
You
Yep.
can tell people not to do a lot of things, but if they do it and they mess it up,
Yep.
we're out of luck.
Understood.
That's
Yeah.
Just one point I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
So I had a question also at our September 7th, 2022 meeting. We had asked as a board to see a long-term plan relative to the time frame and the plantings, and I haven't seen anything like that come through yet. Is that something in the works? Or?
Oh, no, we'll do more work on the plantings as soon as we get approval. I'm not going, the
then
work,
that-
I mean, it's very simple. I didn't know that that was a requirement, actually.
Well, I'm
I
not
wasn't
saying
re-
it was a requirement, it's something that was brought up at our last meeting. I would like to see that before we give approval, because I don't know what I'm approving if I don't have an understanding of what the time frame is, what kind of plantings are going to be there. So you have said in the past that you have a plan. I'd just like to see it in writing.
Oh, okay, well, I meant a site plan, so I had the site plan.
Well, I'm also looking for more specifics relative to the time frame, when things would happen, how it would happen, what types of plantings would be where, and I know some of that's on your site map, but I'd also like to see a little bit more detail for the long-term plan, because theoretically, this could be a 5, 10, 15, 20-year project, and so having that information laid out for us would be very helpful to me.
So I do want to make sure I comment on Jeff's comment on the chemicals, and that has been part of our mission from the beginning. We're totally organic gardening. It's not no synthetic chemicals, no unhealthy, dangerous stuff. Organic gardening. As far as the gardens and the plan for the plants, it's, I wonder if actually we can, we will work with you in having things that are okay with you guys, even after we get approval. We've put a lot of time into this, and a lot of design work and changes over and over, and those are the planting plan is not necessarily going to, it's very basic right now, just some garden plots. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the details that you need, like exactly what plants and exactly when. That's not really the way we're doing it. We're just going to put in garden plots right now. And, the hope was to put some apple trees in if it's getting to be too late for even trees on sale at this point. And so none of that would happen. And
Cheryl, that's what I'm talking about, because I've heard plantings as screening, I've heard plantings as orchard, I've heard planting, and I have no idea what actually would be included. And that's what I'm asking for. You know, as you know, I'm in the solar business, and if I go to a customer and say, you know, give me a bunch of money and I'm going to put solar on your roof, I need to give them the details so they know what they're getting. And similarly, I'm asking for that level of detail. And I know you've spent a lot of time, and I appreciate the amount of time that you spent on this, but I have no idea, other than a drawing that you've submitted, what exactly is going to be where and how it's going to be managed, et cetera. So that's what I'm interested in, and I'm not speaking for the entire board, I'm just speaking for me so that I'm comfortable approving what you're asking for.
So one of the things that we were also wanting to do would be to work with each of the people that were neighbors that had property going right against the land, so that we could make them happy as well. I can do something, but we can as a team decide on, let's have this here and that there. That's easy. I've got ideas about that in my head. That's what is on the paper. But we'd also like to make the people who are neighbors happy, and that was, so whatever I put down, the plan was to work together with them to do changes, to do whatever they like, They're all going to be, it's like, I guess, I think the level of detail that you want is maybe not, it's not the time for that. The site concept plan is I can go ahead and do a detailed plan. It'll take more time.
Well, it sounds like you have a plan in your head. It just needs to be written down so I can read it. I'm not asking for, I don't think I'm asking for anything out of the ordinary, or I'm just asking to try to understand what it is. Because I've gotten some calls from neighbors, and they're concerned about this project, and so in order for them to understand what's going to happen, I think it's only right for them to get an understanding in writing of what you're proposing. And I know you're going to have conversations with them, but again, it comes down to having the details written down so that we can all understand what it is you're proposing to do.
I hear you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns?
Arnie, it's Heather.
Go ahead, Heather.
And I recall at that meeting, and Lee, I don't have my minutes in front of me, but I recall at that meeting, we were going to see, at one point it was a greenhouse, and we had a letter of agreement or something. But what I asked for is, what are the terms of this? And weren't we going to go back to the attorney, Julie, and see if we need an actual proper agreement? If we do need an agreement, what's the process in that? And I think, Cheryl, you asked for 20, 30 years. And I think it's better to start with a smaller number of years to go forward. But where is that detailed out? Where will that be, some of those details be on paper? Julie, did we check with the attorney?
Yes, Jim and I had a conversation, and as he has said right along, Jim does feel that a lease is necessary. His main reason, he's not thinking a complex lease. It can be simple. But his feeling of the lease has to do with liability. If somebody gets hurt when they're gardening, we don't want a lawsuit coming back to the town. And so the lease has more to do with those types of things. What happens if the gardens get abandoned and there needs to be cleanup? A lease is what enforces those things.
Right.
So his recommendation still is, it was when I talked to him 2 weeks ago, is still that a lease in place, albeit, a simple lease, doesn't need to be.
And that also had to do with the way other towns, you were going to look into how other towns worked it together with the community gardens that they had.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
Did you find?
I did. I think I updated the board on this, but I did speak with several other towns. There's really a mix. I think I updated this a couple meetings ago. There's a mix across the state. Many community gardens are not on town property. they're on somebody's private property. Those that are, or school property in some cases. Some municipalities, the garden is actually maintained and managed by the Recreation Department. Some municipalities, the gardens have been there forever. They have a simple lease, which I have a sample of. Or there's some that have been operating and have never had a lease and have never had any issues. So there really is a very broad mix from the town managers that I have heard from.
So a lot of that, when you put it that way, a lot of that is going to be a decision on the board on how they want to handle this.
Correct.
Do you want to go for a full lease? Do you want to do a simple lease? Do you want to have no lease? When I look at this project, the beginning of it, with just the garden beds and things like that, it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. And what bothers me is that we're going to get so much involved with the legal aspect of it that we're going to lose the spirit of the project itself and the people that are behind it and stuff. And as we go through all the legal aspects and all the lawyer talk and all the lawyer expenses to put in a couple of garden beds, we're going to lose the project itself. I understand the reasoning behind it, to protect the town, but as you said, there's some towns that don't have any lease at all, some have a simple lease, some don't do anything, some are managed by the rec department. So maybe it should be a cooperative between your group and the rec department or something like that, which would put it under the auspices of the rec department. I'm just throwing these ideas out there. I don't, just for thought, because it seems like we just keep putting up more blockades to a project that, to me, sounds pretty simple, especially this part of it. If it was the green...
Anymore, if there's, some problems, who's going to clean it up? I mean, we said that in the letter that we sent out, but I think it needs to be down in writing a little bit more, and the terms of length of time that we're leasing it to the organization. And then something in there that if the organization does get the money to put up the greenhouse, then that's a whole nother approval process. So those are the things that I'm concerned about that I'd like to have in writing.
Thank you, Heather.
And I also, this is Lee, worry about a little bit about liability on town property. So I think we talked about that just briefly 10 minutes ago about liability issues. So that we need to take something into consideration when it comes to that.
Thank you, Lee.
Can I quickly clarify on the time frame? When I said 20, 30 years, I wasn't like asking for a 20 or 30-year lease. I think that there was something like somebody said, well, how long do you think the gardens are going to be there? And I hope they'll be there for a long time. There are a lot of community gardens that have been there for like hundreds of years.
Well, and that's the point is, if it was just me making this decision, it was my land, I could, but it's the town, and I just feel as if I just need clarity in writing. And sorry, I keep on trying to get on screen. Oh, there I am. So that's my only point is I'm more comfortable if the details are written out in a simple lease. Doesn't have to be a 20-page lease. Town doesn't have to go into deep debt, but the terms are spelled out and clear. Everyone on the board that may not be here in 5 years, they may be, but Cheryl, there's no guarantee that you're going to be the person here. So to me, it's just the responsible thing to do is to have a simple lease with the details spelled out so that we're all clear on what we're agreeing to.
Thank you, Heather. Jeff? Sure.
I'm not trying to be a wet blanket here, but as water superintendent, it's my job to make sure that this town has clean, adequate supply of water. But I haven't heard anything about, is the greenhouse going to be put on this site now? Or have we changed the plans to just garden beds? I mean the greenhouse itself, that's the...
That would be a discussion later on in the future.
The point I was trying to make was it's an old structure. I hope it's going to be cleaned and repainted because I guarantee you that's lead paint that's on that thing and you don't want it over your water supply. albeit an emergency water supply.
If it is at that point. And that would be another discussion in the future. This is basically a discussion regarding just the gardens.
Okay.
Arnie.
Mr. Roper?
So,
your name first, sir.
Tim Roper, former greenhouse and garden board member, no longer directly involved. That said, I would really like to see this project move forward. This is positive for the town in every way. I'm very encouraged to hear Cheryl Joy's report tonight that the abutters seem to be in large majority in favor of the gardens going in. And I'm sensitive to both sides of the discussion around lease, no lease, because this thing has had a lot of momentum at one point. The momentum was lost, and it'd be nice to get that momentum back and get it moving. That said, certainly the town needs to cover its liabilities. I think a simple lease could do that. And given that pricing being what it is today, inflation with food is one of the fastest. Other than fuel, I think food has gone up faster than anything else. I think this community garden will assist people who maybe are a little food insecure and would be able to grow a garden, whether they live in an apartment or a small house in town or maybe a rental, that they are not allowed to put a garden at that property. So to me, that's a no-brainer. Let's let people help themselves. Let's try to get out of our own way, get this thing moving, and let people in the spring plant a garden. It's not that far away. Right. And just a thought about, Lee, your request. I remember you asked for you're an engineer, I get it. You like details and you like things to be black and white. I understand that. That, in a lot of times, is a good thing. In this case, it seems like community garden is going to be kind of a fluid thing. Do you need 6 plots? Do you need 12 plots? Do you need 20 plots? And maybe a way to handle that would be to say the town grants X number of plots in the first, with the signing of the lease, and then for additional use of the property would require board approval. So that and this is just a suggestion, I don't know, don't shoot me if, so there was talk about an orchard. So that's not going to happen right now. Maybe let's get the plots approved, let's get those things in, have the lease signed, and then if the greenhouse group wants to come back and say, we want to put in a 12-tree orchard, here's where we'd like to put it, here's the plan, here it is in writing, what do you say, select board? And maybe that's a better way to handle this going forward, to let it be incremental.
That would be perfect from my perspective, to have a business plan so that I know what the expectations, because I've heard people say, well, this is no longer part of this project, or this is not going to happen right now, or we're going to put in X number of plots. I have no idea, because it keeps changing, and so for me to get my head around it, I would like to see that detail in writing, and I'm sure that it's going to be fine, because you have it all in your head, Cheryl, but I don't have it in my head.
Well, I know there was a plot, and they're enjoying themselves, and let's use it to bring the community further together. I think there's nothing but positive.
Here, here.
So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else for some comments?
Just to say, we do have a few people that are ready to have plots that need gardening spot, that don't have sun or don't have the land for it.
So what I'm hearing from the board, the consensus seems like a simple lease would be a practical way to go at this point, with some of the minor points put down on paper and then amended as you went forward for project additions, for whatever else was going to be added, just to keep the town in the loop. I think that kind of helps with your end of it also, so you don't have to plan out this whole thing in the future, whereas Mr. Roper was saying it's kind of a fluid thing. It could change as things happen, but if we start out small with a simple lease with what you're asking for right now and take it from there, I think we might be heading in the right direction and satisfy some of the questions that the board members had, and still be able to benefit the town and all the positive things that come with this project also.
And I think for the abutters that were not in favor so much, because there's a lot of unknown, phasing it will let them see and have an experience, and if there's issues that can be addressed, would be easier for them than all of a sudden, a big orchard and shrubs and garden plots, and, if it was phased in, I bet they would feel more comfortable too.
So if you'd like to say something else, go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, I wonder if we can then say, if the board can maybe give the go-ahead for us to have, if we go ahead and have the lease, and if I give, the more detailed plantings that are going in right away, then could we possibly have, if that happens, then everything's a go? Can maybe the select board get together and, say, let's vote on it?
I would hope
Vote on it contingently.
I would hope that's the way it would work, yes.
So I make a motion, I can't make motions.
Arnie, I'm hearing that Cheryl wants this tonight.
Yeah, it's not.
And I 100% am not ready to say that because we haven't disclosed the terms, and I need to see terms before I vote on something that I don't fully understand and know the terms. I just don't know the terms.
Yeah. I don't foresee any action happening tonight, but I think we have a little bit clearer path to get to where we want to go. Though it's a small step, I think it's a step in the right direction.
Yep. And I can start the work.
I agree.
I'll start the work on a lease.
All right.
Yep.
Should we collaborate so that you can, tell me?
I think we could do the homework on our end, and then...
Let me do on our end, and if I need something from you, I will certainly reach out.
And then we could discuss a little more in detail with the rest of the board also about some of the finer points, or what your additions or not, what would be in there.
So Cheryl, just one last point before we move on. I've just written a very brief list of what I'm looking for, and it could go something like this. Develop X number of plots in spring of 2023. Subheading plots would be 8 by 12 or whatever you want to say. Plantings would be restricted to whatever. Chemical fertilizer would be prohibited, et cetera, that kind of detail. Number 2, plant fruit trees in spring of 2024. Point number 3, develop other plantings for screening purposes in spring of 2025. That's what I'm looking for, something along those lines, just so I know what you're thinking of relative to the timing, what would be happening when, and I think that would give neighbors, people who are abutters to the property, a comfort level as well. So that's kind of what I was thinking about.
Okay, that sounds good.
Thank you, Lee.
Do you want me to send this to you?
Thank you, Lee.
Okay.
And then I will start the background of the lease, but then Cheryl Joy, when you have that stuff together, send it to me, and I will include it.
And we'll have the survey hopefully by then also.
Yeah, we should.
Just to, I mean, it's pretty obvious where the boundary lines are, but a couple of neighbors are affected by it in a big way because of just through past practice of use of the turnarounds and use of certain areas and stuff. So it's kind of important to make sure to know where those lines are, even though we got a pretty good idea where they are, but it's, at this point, it'd be good to have it legally known exactly where they are. Anyone else for any questions, comments, or concerns regarding the topic? Thanks again, Cheryl. Keep plugging away.
Thank you.
And your group.
Thank you very much.
Next item on our agenda is a secondary well update from the Dufresne Group. And I know we've been talking about infrastructure and waste management and wells and a bunch of other things when it comes to our small town. And all in all, we have a pretty good infrastructure system in town. And I know that when the wastewater part comes up, that's going to be coming up for upgrades also. But the secondary well thing, which has been on the minds of Jeff Holden and the town for a while now, to have a backup to our original well on 103, what do they call that field there?
Jeffrey Well?
Jeffrey Well.
Jeffrey Well.
Thank you. So Naomi Johnson is here to give us an update on the search for a secondary well or possible locations and things like that.
Yep, I can give you an update. So the Jeffrey Well has been there for about 40 years. In the early 80s is when it was constructed. And, you know, there's been a Canal Street well also, which Jeff mentioned, but that is not your primary source. It's really just there as an emergency. So, as you mentioned, you know, it has been in planning for a little while, looking for a second well, but really the impetus for it really came to be as a result of the pandemic. Demands really increased substantially in 2020. What the state of Vermont looks at for permitting your wells is the maximum day demand. So the highest demand between 24 hours in one day of the year. And that number almost doubled in 2020 because of the additional people in town. And so that put actually the town over the limit where you need to start planning. You're required to. So it's not just that you had the foresight to look for a secondary well. Now with that high level of a maximum day demand, you have to. And that's because it reaches 90% of the permitted yield of the well. So, and there's more information I can go into with you on that topic, but basically, at this point, we've done some preliminary groundwork, which was really building on the engineering report that was done probably about 5 years ago before the water system was improved with some new water mains in the tank. And so we have a 5-page document that really establishes the need for a secondary well, and then also talks about some prospective sites for the well. And putting another well at the existing site of the Jeffrey Well is one of the alternatives. We looked at about 13 different sites and narrowed it down to that site and then 2 other parcels. One is on Green Mountain Turnpike and the other is the town recreational facility. We also involved a hydrogeologist with the project. He investigated your existing well and actually put a camera down that and did some investigations while we were on site to just see what the condition is of the inside of the well. And it is in good condition. But there is an issue with the numerical value that they use for the yield, and that is that the state doesn't have great records on how they assigned the existing well yield to that well. So, but the recommendation from the hydrogeologist is 2 different things. One is to do an investigation there at the Jeffrey Well site to do actually a test well drill to establish the yield and also determine if that could be a prospective site for a second well. And with that, you'd also build a new building there. But he'd also would go to one of the other sites, the one on Green Mountain Turnpike, and do a test well there. So this work is funded by the state of Vermont. And similar to the past project, it goes in phases. So we did the first report, as I mentioned, the short report to establish need. The next phase is really just to look at the hydrogeological investigations. And then from there, you would pick a well site and go into a design. But again, it's funded by the state of Vermont, so it is interest-free money that you do not have to pay back. You are reimbursed for your costs. You do not have to pay back until you would go to a construction phase in the future of the well. This work, which is really just the hydrogeologist's work, is eligible for a subsidy. Subsidy meaning you don't have to pay the full 100% of the cost, and the subsidy amount is 28%. So at this stage, what we're doing, requesting, is to apply formally to the state of Vermont with a scope of work for the hydrogeological investigations, and that would be just one of the planning stages before you would go any further.
There's also in that program, there's a 28% forgiveness
Yes.
piece. to that loan.
Yeah, so that's, when I say subsidy, that's forgiveness of the amount. So if you borrowed, and we're looking at probably, in my report, I estimated the cost at about $140,000. It would be less than that. I got an estimate from Jeff Hoffer, who's the hydrogeologist, today, and his costs would probably be more like a $75,000 amount for going out with a well driller and drilling 2 test wells and also doing the permitting that's associated with that work. So say you were to request $75,000 from the state of Vermont, you would be repaying 72% of that amount.
And then, Naomi, I'm sorry, I got up, so I didn't hear part of it, but is that for both sites?
Yes.
The 2 sites we talked about? Okay.
So can you describe the testing procedure that would be done? Because I understand that a new well would be, or a couple of wells be needed at the new proposed site, but I'm just wondering about the actual Jeffrey Well site. Because I'm assuming we have observation wells there or not?
There are 2 observation wells there, and so basically what they would do is they would go drill a 6-inch, probably 6-inch, could be 4-inch, but probably 6-inch diameter hole down to groundwater, and then they would do pumping for at least 3 days and do monitoring of the groundwater to see what the effects of the groundwater table are during the pumping, to make sure it can sustain it.
I'd have to ask Jeff this question, but is there any possibility we can turn off the well that's there for a day and let it recover and then turn that on, just use that as our pump test? And the other question I have is the screen that's in there now fully penetrating, or is it just the upper part of the aquifer? I'm not sure. And again, I'm sorry to get into the weeds, but I'm just, this is something that I have some experience with, so I'm just wondering if doing a 6-inch well to the top of the aquifer, is that going to really give us what we need? And I'm not questioning the hydrogeologist.
Sure. So some of the details would be best answered by Jeff Hoffer, the hydrogeologist, but to answer the first part of your question, so the existing well has a yield of 450 gallons per minute established at the state. As I mentioned, they don't have a strong basis for how they came up with that number. There are some records from when that project was first done in the 1980s, but they don't have there's no clear well drillers yield test.
Right.
So currently the well is operated about 300 gallons per minute. And Jeff can speak to that more, but it's basically to avoid drawing in silts and other fines. So the objective is to get a yield that's significantly above 300 gallons per minute. And that would be going at another site on the property. The initial investigations look like the better site would be further to the east of the existing well.
Okay.
Further away from where the solar fields are.
So when they do a well, a test well like that, they're not going into bedrock. This is just in the gravel, just till you hit a water table.
It is into the gravel, but and there are sites where you have a bedrock well. I mean, and generally, where we are next to the river, we're going to expect that it's going to be a gravel well. Yeah. Jeff's comments today when he sent the cost estimate were, if he were to hit bedrock, the cost is going to be lower than his estimate.
But usually, wouldn't the output be a lot less in the bedrock?
Potentially.
Depends.
Yeah.
Depends on how big the cracks are.
Yeah. So a high level of variability. He did not send me anything yet, but will later this week, as far as he will have a detailed scope that outlines exactly what his plan of work is.
So at the new site, or sites, there were two new sites, or just one?
There are 2, but the better of the 2 is the one on Green Mountain Turnpike. The other one is the town rec facility, just because of existing uses there and potential for future. It's not as attractive.
So that would be the same methodology, put in a 6-inch well plus a couple of observation wells?
Yes.
And then pump out whatever it is to be able to calculate what the flow rate could be? Okay.
That second site that is at the rec area, is there enough distance between things to have a well that's isolated enough away from things? I mean, you have the town pool, you have chlorine, you have other things going on there.
Yeah, so that, I mean, I'd call that the third prospective site, and we're not planning to do any test well drilling there, just because it could impact your plans for the future. And it is a fairly large parcel. It doesn't mean that that you couldn't satisfy all this isolation requirements. But considering that there are 2 other sites that don't have those issues, we would recommend going with those 2 first. And the other thing to mention too, when I mentioned that there's a lot of prospective sites, what we also have to consider is how close are those sites to existing water main, so that the cost of connecting is minimized. And then also, where is the facility, the prospective site, compared to existing development? For example, putting one, Canal Street's a good example. If we wanted to do a well like in the middle of the town, you're going to have potentially some issues with abutting property owners. Maybe people don't want a new building erected, right next to their existing residence.
So all this work is just it's going to be to find a site, basically.
Correct.
And do we need board's permission?
Well, I would like, I mean, you don't need to vote, but I, would like permission to complete the step 1. Step 1 application so that we can get the funding for the hydrogeologist, for Jeff Hoffer to come in and do the
And
work.
that step 1, does it require town funds at this point?
No, that is a loan, 28% subsidy, and that's payback in 5 years. Much like when we did the planning for the water replacement. It's same process. When you construct, it rolls in.
And the question becomes, is it going to be the water users that are footing the bill for this, or is it going to be all the taxpayers? Because a lot of the times, even the water project with the second water tank and stuff, that was water users, correct?
Correct. If you want to change it from water users, you need to have a town vote to do that.
To change it to
the whole tax
the
base.
whole town.
The whole tax
So
base.
we're talking about just the water users for all this.
For now, we're talking just the water users.
So as a select board, do we make this decision, or do we have to put on our water hats?
For just saying to me, go ahead and do the step 1 application,
Okay.
I'm fine, but when we start getting into real stuff here, we'll get into the water commissioner use. Yeah.
I'm happy to move forward with this.
It seems like we almost have to, because of what you said about that maximum use on that one day was over our capacity or something, and now that drew the attention of the state.
Correct. And really, it was more that, as we're going through and writing the document to support the need, we compare those values and say, well, you're at the 90% level, and if that maximum day is sustained, year after year after year, it did drop the next year, but not back to its normal levels.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that's important too is getting the planning in place, because, I just spent the past 2 weeks at 2 different conferences with the commissioners of all the state agencies that are talking about get your plans ready, because all of the trillions of dollars that have somehow appeared from the sky are hitting all of these agencies in huge buckets. And projects that are ready are going to get funded. Those that are not are going to miss out. So, down the road, and obviously we're not going too far down the road here, but, come next year, by the time this is done, there could be funding to pay for that second well. So we want to be ready for it.
It's always that shovel-ready project that's going to get
We've got to
funded.
do it anyway, but it would be good to be ready, and we can start really looking for some funding.
Yeah, and the other thing to mention is that goes back to the costs, where you may be wondering, well, how much is this going to cost us? We just did a water project. So in my report, I do give you the costs for the whole entire project, which would include the well, a standby generator, a well house, and the connecting main. And that is about, total project cost is about $700,000 to $800,000. And that includes all the permitting and the costs that we're discussing tonight for the hydrogeologist.
That's with the new well, that's everything.
Yes.
Including a generator.
Yes.
Including that. And the piping to wherever the water is, the closest place, and does it go under a river too? Are there any of these sites require river crossings?
No.
No? So I think the board is on board for taking that step to approve it. Anybody have any questions or comments or concerns?
I'm just wondering, it's Heather, what's your estimate of increase of water flow?
So like for the demand projection?
Yeah, capacity.
Right, so we look at least a 20-year window, and I think right now, we just have to keep tracking it. There is a trend upward, and even without the pandemic numbers, you had a trend upward, and it's not huge. So, for example, you were maybe 5 years ago 150,000 gallons per day. Now you're at 180,000 gallons per day, and that's the average. And that is well below what the well can put out. But even in 20 years from now, it's a slight increase of maybe it's, a few percentage per year, but it's not a doubling.
So I guess the consensus is to proceed with this? And you might as well stay right where you are, because it seems like the next topic is going to be you too, because the more water we use, the more water we send to the sewer treatment plant.
So, right. The next thing to talk about is wastewater. And so we have talked for several years about doing a wastewater asset management plan. And part of that goes back to the additional wastewater flows that are going to the plant during storm events. I'm sure if you think back about like the Mountain View areas, and there are connections from some pumps in people's basements that are sending wastewater. So it's really water that's coming in from high groundwater levels that's going to the treatment plant. And so one of the reasons to look at the wastewater system in whole is to say, is it just this region of the town that's having these higher flows, which we call inflow and infiltration, or are there other regions? And so if you were to invest money to try to fix that problem, what if you found that you needed to do other things? And so the objective to do a wastewater asset management plan is take an inventory of your facilities. And so that would include the wastewater pump stations, the wastewater treatment plant, and also to do a survey of the manholes and to take measurements on those and to do a comprehensive mapping. As part of that, there would also be cleaning and interior televising of the wastewater mains to look at their condition, and there would be some flow metering. And the purpose of the flow metering goes back to, again, the inflow and infiltration to try to determine where are the highest areas in town where there may be issues. Again, you have an old system. The majority of the collection system, the sewer pipes, was constructed in the late 1960s. So it's aged, and so there, of course, will be high levels of inflow infiltration. For example, roots grow into the sewer mains, and that can create the cracks that let in either water from rain events or just high groundwater level water getting into the mains. So the project that we're talking about is to do that wastewater asset management plan. It would include, again, hiring an outside firm to come and do cleaning first, but then televising the mains, and also to do the flow metering. This would be another program that would be requested of funding through the state of Vermont. This would be the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund. And they also offer types of grants and subsidies with potentially a 50% subsidy on the project.
The other benefit to this report is it gives us the report that we need to go apply for the funding that we need to replace the force main here on Depot Street.
And that goes back to, again, the steps that the state follows for both the clean water and the drinking water revolving loan programs. Step one is you always have to have a report that justifies why you're doing the project. And then step two would be the final design. Step three is the construction. So you can't get through, their program without completing the justification step.
Well, I think it always helps to know what you have and how it works before you decide how you're going to improve it or fix it or update it or whatever works, to bring it to more efficient or however. But having that information, I think, is real important to do anything and to do it, correctly.
And it will be valuable because in 2023 is when we are going to start the planning for the sewer plant upgrade. So it all kind of will connect nicely together.
Kind of ties into our housing discussions.
It
and
does.
our infrastructure discussions and trying to,
So are you good with moving forward with the asset management plan?
anybody on the board, questions or comments or concerns?
I don't remember, you probably said what the cost was going to be, but I
I
forgot.
don't think I did. So the asset management, the total is $78,000.
Okay.
And potentially up to a 50% grant.
Right.
What's the time frame on that? How long would that take from approval to?
Well, I'm going to guess, while I look at my schedule, that it's probably a 3 to 5 month time period. Mostly because the survey work takes a little while, and it's weather dependent. And so, you know, I can say that 3 to 5 months, but then again, if we were to start now, we would not be doing it in January, so we'd basically take a pause.
Listen to this shit.
Steve, can you mute yourself, please?
So just a quick question about timing. I'm assuming that the highest potential inflows of non-wastewater to the system would be in the spring? And so would that be when the flow metering would take place?
Yes. So, I mean, ideally, what is the inflow infiltration analysis is multi phases depending on what you find the first time around. But a more detailed analysis would be to do flow metering so you capture the dry weather periods, but also wet weather. And so we have kind of 2 periods where we look at high groundwater. So around now, September, October, and then also in the spring being definitely the highest amount.
So not to get into the weeds, but you're going to use pressure transducers to determine the height of water in these lines and then compare it to various other times?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So we'd be doing data logging of the flows.
Right,
The
okay.
transducers.
Okay, great, thank you.
I know the Planning Commission was, in some of their discussions at some of their meetings, were talking about the sewer lines, locations, manhole covers, and there was a lot of places in town where it all wasn't exactly clear where everything was. So I think it would help in a lot of ways, especially that end of it too.
Sure. I mean, there's a set of maps that when Dufresne Henry did the project back, like I said, in 1969, and they're pretty good, but, the manholes, they get paved over, and sometimes they're not even in a paved road, and so they can get covered with gravels.
I've seen some colored paintings on the road, and it says there's a manhole underneath, and it sure doesn't look that way, but
Yeah.
it must be. Anybody else? Any other questions or concerns? If not, I think all you need is an okay from the board to proceed with this, the same as the last one.
Am I writing them or?
Thank you, Naomi.
You're welcome. So I think there will be a form for both applications, and Julie may be bringing that back to you to get a signature.
Yep.
All right.
Am I drafting it or are you?
I can draft them.
Okay, thank you.
It's really simple. Yeah. I can do the easy part, but then Julie's got to fill in the financial part for the town. There's lots of parts.
If Naomi drafts it, you'll have it November 2nd. If I have to figure out the language,
It might be.
you'll have it in December.
Well, between the two of us, you'll make a good team.
Okay.
Thank you, Naomi. Appreciate it. Next item on our agenda is a discussion regarding housing. It kind of was brought up over the discussions that we've had about zoning, about short-term rentals, about housing in general, and we decided to have a discussion just regarding the housing, the shortage, the prices of houses, the shortage of houses available, apartments, all those different aspects of housing. And it seems like it's not just a problem in Chester, a problem all over the state, and if not, a good part of the country also. Julie, I know you were at some meetings that you had shared some information with some state folks regarding this topic. Can you share that with us?
I can. So Preston and I have been talking about housing for actually many months now, but it just seems the appropriate time to start having the conversation in public. A couple of the different conferences I was at, Preston was at one of them, Preston and Kathy, and then I was at the Town Managers Conference last weekend. And there is a lot of money coming into the state, again, the trillions raining down from heaven. And a lot of that money is going into housing. And so, in trying to think about what does that look like for Chester, a lot of the funding, the biggest concerns that they're talking about now is workforce housing, which I know the Planning Commission has been discussing as well. There's the workforce housing versus quote-unquote affordable housing, what affordable housing means today versus what it used to mean, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And just the need at all levels. And so a thought that has been coming into my mind, but I haven't wanted to speak it out loud, but I will now, is the potential of a development in Chester. So the water tank land, the 139 acres that the town purchased, is greatly located. There are definitely some constraints with the property. There is slopes, there's some access stuff that would have to be worked through and figured out for sure. But just in very, very general concepts, it is roughly 100 acres that's left over. It's right at the end of the existing water sewer lines. And we're getting ready to do a sewer upgrade, we're getting ready to do a secondary well. The timing is good and appropriate to start looking at what can Chester do. Now, this is step one of about 10,000 steps and none of it in my bailiwick of how to build a development. But we've connected with the right people, and there are definitely state agencies who are very interested. There is funding coming. There's some pilot projects that are going to be funded for actual development of complete neighborhoods. We obviously won't be ready for that, but just starting the conversations. And the number one piece of advice that has been given to me is to start the conversation in the public, because when you create a new neighborhood, that has an impact on your town, and in a lot of ways. And so getting the conversation started. The very first thing that I really think Chester needs to do is establish a housing committee. We don't need a housing authority. We don't need, a trust. We just, a housing committee. I would love for them to be appointed by the select board so that it is a committee that is not just advisory. It's a committee that would have some authority behind it. And to start really looking at the housing issue. I see this housing committee working very closely with the Planning Commission because there's a lot of overlap there in those two committees. And not just to look at, a brand new neighborhood, but to look at a lot of ways that we could do infill. I know the Planning Commission has done work on the accessory dwelling unit stuff, modifying some bylaws there. There's funding coming from the state to help people, convert accessory dwelling units into apartment buildings, or into apartments, as infill housing. There's a couple locations that might be great for some expanded senior housing, but really have a group that is just focused on housing. Certainly I would be connected to it. Certainly Preston as the town planner would be connected to it, but assemble a group of people that are knowledgeable in all the many different facets of housing and come together and see what we can do for Chester. So that would be the first thing I would like to do. And if the board is in agreement to that, then Preston and I will start putting our heads together about what we think that committee might look like. And what we're looking for people. And then another thought, and this is not for you to approve tonight, is looking at some ways that Chester can help, that our institution of Chester can help incentivize maybe some ADU conversions and some of those types of things. We have water sewer connection fees. They're pricey. To connect to municipal water and sewer, it's $5,000 just for the tapping fee. That's money that goes into a reserve. There's no direct cost to the town to do a tap because the landowner pays the engineer to actually, and the plumber to actually do the tap. But, that's an area where maybe we can cut that price and make it more affordable. We have a large economic development revolving loan fund that is sitting really stagnant right now. I'm not saying give money away, but certainly we can offer interest rates much lower than the banks are today. And, maybe there's small short-term loans that could help people convert existing structures into, units. And, just starting to have some thoughts, kind of thinking out the box a little bit about what assets we have that we can share with people who may be interested in creating some units in our town. There.
Those are some real interesting points. Some of those items I haven't heard for a long time, like the revolving fund, the loan fund there. You're right. It hasn't come before the board in a long time that someone's even applied for that money, and it is quite a chunk of change.
It is.
And the little things that the town could do, I think, would be really important. And they're small, but they help in the long run. Those hookup fees and the sewer fees and the water fees and all the other items associated with that. And the Planning Commission's been doing a great job as far as trying to regulate or amend our zoning regulations to encourage this type of action and stuff. So if we could work with them on the fee end of it and stuff, I would help. But the idea that you have of getting a group together for a housing committee or a housing advisory board or whatever, I think is a great idea. To try to get some folks together that would start thinking about this and thinking outside. It's not going to go away, the problem.
No.
No, absolutely not. What you were saying earlier, Julie, just reminded me of Ben's comment last meeting about a home. And that's really what we're trying to incentivize and foster is people seeing Chester as their home. And if you can't find an affordable place to live, then how does that help us as a community? So looking at this, I made a list of all the things you just were mentioning. And looking at this, I think it's a great place to start the conversation and think about how do we as a town, not just the select board, but everybody in this room, everybody who's watching in Zoom land, everybody who's a part of the community of Chester, to take some interest in and action in this particular issue, because this is huge. And this is where we're probably falling down the greatest is affordable housing for people who live and want to work and live in Chester. Right. It's just a very difficult situation. And
I do want to clarify, because I did learn something. I learned a lot of things, I shouldn't say it that way. But I did learn one very key thing, which is, affordable. We all have this image of what is affordable. But affordable housing, actually defined by the state, is your mortgage, taxes and insurance, should not exceed 30% of your income. So that is affordable housing. It's less than 30%, or it's no more than 30% of your annual income. So what is affordable housing is not just a number, it's a fluid number, but it kind of gives an idea of, then you start looking at, okay, what is your median household income for Chester? And then that starts getting you into the range of what, a mortgage or a rent should be. So for each community, that's going to be different.
That's going to be extremely difficult when you use a metric like that and what the average person makes in Chester and stuff. You're not going to be able to afford anything still.
Well, our median household income was actually lower than you think it is. And we found that, remember when we did the water project?
60, wasn't it?
It was around 60. So I think those numbers have definitely changed. That was 5, 6, 7 years ago we did that. Oh, Naomi's gone. But I think that number is definitely probably up. But it may not be as high as we think it is when you start looking at the whole town.
The problem with that is that the housing market, the prices have gone crazy.
Oh,
If
absolutely.
this discussion was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, it would be a little easier to see some kind of answer to it. But boy, with the way the prices have gone, it's going to make it that much tougher to afford a house in this town.
So what do you need, Julie, from us? Do you need?
Nothing right now. If you're not, horrifically opposed to the idea of a housing committee, then I will work with Preston and we'll kind of put our heads together and really start thinking about what would make that up, what we'd be looking for on that, and kind of maybe put some ideas together about, some tasks and scope of work and that kind of thing for that committee. So I'll come back to you with that.
Thank you. Mount Escutney.
That sounds great. That really sounds great, Julie.
Thanks, Lee. The Mount Escutney Regional Commission just approved their new regional plan, and there's a whole chapter on housing. And it's actually pretty interesting reading. They have a lot of goals and a lot of ideas that they're putting out there. It's kind of lacking for solutions, but they definitely have identified the problems, and it's spelled out, and they're putting a lot on local governments to help achieve these goals and stuff. But it's all out there, and it's all there. And I guess there's another initiative, Keys to the Valley, that they also reference, which is 2 different regional commissions in Vermont and 1 in New Hampshire, actually, that are working on the same issues and the same project. Yeah. And it's, like we were saying before, it's not just Chester, it's everywhere. It's hitting us harder because of the type of community we are, being close to the tourist location, a resort destination, that type of thing. So it makes it a little harder, and it has affected the prices a little bit. But
and there is the new municipal planning grants have opened up. I do want to find out what data the Planning Commission has already gathered on the topic, but there is the possibility of using the municipal planning grant to do a housing study for Chester. We talk about what we think we need, but we don't actually know what we need. So, but there's a lot of data that's out there too. So we may work along those lines.
That chapter on housing did have a breakdown of the type of units and whether they're second homes or whether they're primary homes.
There is some data out there, so we may not need to, but yeah.
So we're good in heading that direction.
Sure.
Get a committee together and at least try to help and figure it out.
Absolutely.
That's going to be a tough one no matter what, boy, I tell you that. All right, we'll move on to our next item.
Arnie, there's a hand.
Thank you, Sue. Steve, I'm sorry, Steve, I didn't see your hand. Go for it. Steve? Probably had your hand up for a while and I didn't see it. Now you're not there.
He just put it up. Oh, there he goes.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I'm just going to say that a lot of what I'm hearing tonight is orbiting infrastructure and accommodating whatever concern. And so your planning commission has done a lot of legwork here. I mean, they've gone the distance, or they really have, over and above, the call of duty. So, whatever concerns that you're bringing up here tonight, whether it be housing or anything else, it really orbits this one focal point, your infrastructure, to accommodate it. Thank you, Arnie.
Thank you, Steve. You're right about the Planning Commission doing a lot of the work already. They've been tackling these issues for a while, and the infrastructure's been coming up, and we're trying to deal with that. Thanks again, Steve. Anything else? Any other comments for the housing discussion before I go on? All right, the next item is short-term.
You have something to say? I thought you might. That's why
I didn't even mention it yet. You're already moving. Go for it.
No, I was getting the look.
I knew you had something to add.
It's to revisit our short-term rental.
No, he had something on housing.
Oh, you got something on the housing?
I really think it's important, and there's a lot of legwork that the planning board has already done. I think we're farther beyond what a study, that we need to really start identifying sites, we need to start identifying money sources, and we need to go forward. Studying it is not going to even come close to solving the problem. You know it's there.
Do you think there's enough, have you guys obtained enough data, do you think, to know what the actual needs are as far as, or is it everything?
The big thing that the money comes at 28 units.
Yep.
So there's the deal. You want a site that handles 28 units, and that'll get you the funding.
Right.
But there is a horrendous need, and it doesn't take very long for you to look at it.
And are you seeing that, is your research showing need across the spectrum?
Absolutely.
That's what I wanna know. Okay.
As much as you say low income, the problem is you really need worker housing.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, that's the big key term, is that worker housing is what we don't have. You know, yes, they end up being low income, but the thing is, I don't think you can compete with the wages. But the key to the project, what we need to do is be looking to the town to find a site that will handle a 28 unit, because that's where the money is.
Yep.
All right.
Is that a one building, 28 units, or 28 units could be spread out? Or
28 units could be spread out.
Okay.
Could be duplexes, it could be
Duplexes,
single-family
four
homes.
families,
Could be
whatever.
anything, right. Yeah.
But that's the magic number, it seems?
That seems
That's
to
where
be
the
magic
funding
number.
starts to really make
Then
sense.
the funding comes real. You know, you'll get so much, it's kind of limited, and that's a 28 unit because it's a rental property. That makes the income function so it doesn't have to break, it has to break even. There's the secret.
That'll get the housing trust involved.
Yeah, that'll get the housing trust involved.
Yeah. There's a lot of players to these. There's a lot of players involved in the development of these.
No, you got to get up to the mic, Hugh, and you got to give us your name.
Thank you, Peter.
Just to add on to what Peter's saying, over the last few months, we did have the Windsor and Wyndham Housing Trust come in, and they talked to us about, what are some of the ways to create more housing in the denser village areas, if you can, find the land and you've got water and sewer. What Peter's talking about is this 28 unit is sort of the break-even point from a developer's point of view to make it viable to do a project, allow the builder to make some money, and also still have, either rents or cost to the homeowner reasonable. So I think that's sort of where the 28 number comes in. And then the other way to solve that problem, which we've already started to talk about, is when you move out into the rural areas, then you start trying to figure out, where can I do an accessory dwelling unit, and how are we helping facilitate that, so that you can get a mix of maybe some denser housing in the village with with like a 28 unit sort of thing. If you're moving out into the rural areas, let's figure out how to help people create accessory dwelling units that can create more housing. And to your point earlier, that affordable housing thing, it's a moving target, right? If it's 30% of your income, and people in the community are making anywhere between, $18 and $30 or $40 an hour, that number's different for everybody. Right. So I think the other thing that is ultimately going to have to factor in is just the wages are a problem, right? The wealth inequity is going to always be an issue with respect to having people that need to live and work here have a place that they can afford. So that's the stuff we've been.
Thank you, Hugh.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Hugh.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I just want to, my name's Kathy Hasbrook, and I want to vote for infill in the village. We can probably find several places where we can add a few here and a few there. And it would probably be breaking trail a little bit, because Wyndham and Windsor people are saying, well, we'll do you 28, but you're on your own if you don't have 28. So, yeah. But if we do a couple, maybe then there'll be a couple more, because it's easier, because we know where we're going. So.
And that's where town incentives may help.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe we can get some volunteers for the housing committee? Am I looking that way?
Oh, no, never look.
Work on that.
Wow. All right, we're going to move on to short-term rentals. And I think in our packet is the latest version of the short-term rental. There's been a few changes on it, it seems. I had it, so, oh, there it is. I think basically what happened with it is that someone has to mute their microphone out there. It sounds like.
Lee Dakin.
Was it?
It's, yeah. I think she's shuffling papers on her desk.
Oh.
What is that saying, Kathy?
Can you hear me? I went to mute the person who it was, and it changed, and I hit Town of Chester. I can't hear you.
We can hear you.
We can hear you, so can you hear us now? Hang in there. We're going to try to figure something out. We have two technical people here. Can you hear me now, Sue?
I can. My apologies. The participants rotate, and I think it's Lee's mic, and I went to mute her, and I hit the town.
It's okay.
And I can mute Lee because she's a board member, but I think that's where it's coming from.
Okay.
I just unmuted myself. I had muted myself. I'll mute myself.
Okay, anyway.
I think we're all set now. You can hear us now? Clear, Sue?
Very, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy.
So the ordinance that we had at our last meeting has been updated a little bit, or changed a little bit. Host was taken out, hosted and unhosted were combined.
Unhosted was taken out.
Unhosted was taken out. So now there was no distinction between hosted or not hosted. And the fees were made uniform for everyone that's applying. So there was no structured fee for whether you are a resident or not resident. But other than that, correct me if I'm wrong, the ordinance is basically staying the same?
Correct. This is just, Preston and I took all the information that we heard, and tried to, it all seemed to focus around the hosted, unhosted, on those concerns, so trying to find a midpoint. We felt that this seemed to reach it from our perspective. The board may completely disagree, planning commission may disagree, we don't know, but it was just our attempt.
So the penalties were basically still the same, the fines changed a little bit because of what was there?
Right, and I do want to say, I mean, this ordinance is 4 pages, 2 of which have to deal with enforcement, which feels very heavy. But when a town adopts an ordinance in the state of Vermont, there is specific language that has to be placed within that ordinance that deals with enforcement. That language just happens to take up 2 pages of a 4-page document. On a bigger ordinance that are normally 10 pages, it doesn't stand out. This one, it stands out. The town is not looking to be enforcement happy. We try very hard not to be that way with our taxpayers. So I just want to address that because it does feel enforcement heavy.
So are we looking for a motion to approve this?
Well, Jim has not looked at this.
Motion on it, yeah.
Jim has it, but he has not had a chance to review.
So, yeah, we have to hold off on that.
Okay.
But now's the time for discussion on it. Any comments, questions, concerns? Are we happy with the fact that what was changed in it? Is it still cost neutral as far as getting the agency that's
We're hoping
the
so.
data mining
We're
and
going to
stuff
try
for
it.
the fees?
We're hoping so. It's a guess, but we're hoping that it is.
So the other issue was, we had thought about trying to collect the data without going through
They won't do it.
a whole year, so we have to sign up for the entire.
If you want the data from them, we have to do something along these lines. Yeah.
And I think that, the data like that would work, but it's a snapshot. It's just that one day. Whereas 2 months afterwards, it could be something totally
Yeah, no,
different.
I totally get it. It sounds like the planning commission has done quite a bit of the work already to identify or collect some of the data that we're looking for, so.
It's basically the first step. It's not any caps, any other regulations, other than a registration. I mean, basically, that's all we're asking. And if it's over 8 people, then, of course, there's, the state gets involved, and there's some hoops that they have to jump through because of that. But if it's under 8 people, it's just you have to sign off that you've taken care of these issues or whatever they might be.
But that's not coming from us, that's coming from the state.
Correct.
Yeah. So basically, all we're doing is collecting data.
At this point.
Right.
It does open the door to do something further along the lines, because this would be the first step. You know, it gives us the power to do something, do something more if we wanted to. I mean, I don't know, is this the end of it and we're not going to do anything? Or are we going to wait for the data to come in? Or, you know, do we go further from this?
Well, I think that's where the data comes in to tell us where we need to go. And so I guess we wait for the attorney to review this, make any suggestions or changes, and then.
Barney?
So we wouldn't necessarily vote on it next meeting, or we would?
It could be. Sue, did you have a quick question, or you're not hearing this?
Heather.
Oh, Heather, go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's great to have the attorney just look at it. I think a registry is fine, and I also am really happy that we're not just implementing this, but I'm sure the housing committee can look at the whole picture of housing, not just the short-term rentals, but include the short-term rentals. So I'm happy that we're getting a broader understanding of housing in our community.
Thanks, Heather. Russell, did you want to? Just give us your name and go for it.
Is this long enough to come on?
It should be.
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah, it should be.
So my name's Russell Fearing. I was here last time as well with respect to this topic. Had a couple of questions, and again, sorry, I have notes here that I wanted to get through. So one of the questions I think we did, and you raised it again, in terms of being able to get some data prior to going forward with this, and that sounds like we can't do that, right? So we need to subscribe to the service in order to get that. So one of the questions that I had, right, so is, you know, if you have over 8 people in your rental, right, and you have an inspection come in, how long do you have to cure anything that's noted in the inspection, right? It's very silent, it says nothing on that in the ordinance, right? So that would be one question that I have, particularly as it relates to start being eligible to be assessed a fee, right? If you rent your house, and like I said last time, we probably rent it on average maybe 6 weeks a year, plus or minus. You know, we have people that have committed to renting Christmas, February, et cetera. If this goes in, you have an inspection, and you have to cure something, you need time to do that. We're committed to rent for people's vacations and things like that. So that's one thing that I didn't see in there that I would think there'd be some definition around that, whether it's what violation it is, or, I mean, I looked at the inspection form on the Vermont State website, and it wasn't like building code type of things. It was more fire extinguishers, egress, hardwired smokes, some new kind of smokes that last for 10 years, things like that. Is that the criteria that we're being evaluated on or not, or we don't know?
Over 8 people, and the planning commission is who did the research on this, that's why I'm looking to them, Russell. Preston's here, so we're gonna let him deal with it, but that's a state inspection.
I guess I'll sit next to
You can grab one of those microphones.
I think your question is about the properties that rent more than 8 and the state comes and does the inspection. The interesting thing here is that you have to satisfy the state. It's really not satisfying the town. And what the state will do is, for instance, if you had a rental in your basement that had just one entrance, they would say, that is completely unsafe, you can't rent it until you fix it. But if they also said, gee, you know, you should put in a bigger alarm system, they'll often give you a provisional approval and then give you some time to do it. So I guess I would say that once you get into the realm of a state inspection, it's really up to them to decide what time you have to do it, not us, not the town.
Okay, so when they define that, then that would direct when, if any fees were due and how long you had to cure it. Obviously, if I have a safety violation, I want to cure it immediately, right?
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to say is that if you're a rental that's more than 8, before the town gives you your registration, you have to have an inspection from the state. And that inspection will either say you're good for occupancy, you're provisionally good for occupancy, or you're not good for occupancy until you do certain things.
So can I ask Preston you a question? It looks like the fees and penalties are being assessed not for issues related to the safety of the dwelling, but related to advertising a property for short-term rentals without having obtained a permit from the town. So it has nothing to do with any of the violations that the state may find.
Yeah, I mean, I think what would tie into the violation is that if somebody could not get a permit from the state and they just kept renting it, which means they don't have a registration, then we could fine them for that.
Right.
That's exactly what I'm asking.
Yeah.
So, Sean?
Preston, is the state regulation actually in force now, so that if you're renting to more than 8, you have to have an inspection?
I will answer that based upon my experience when I worked in Killington. The law says that you're supposed to be inspected if you're renting to more than 8. But before Killington had a registration program, many people were just doing it, and the state wasn't really enforcing it. And the state people actually were pleased that Killington had this registration because it made people call the state and say, I need your registration, your inspection before I can register. So I think what we try to say is that we're not asking for anything that you aren't supposed to be doing. It's just that some people aren't doing it.
Thank you, Preston.
Can I ask more questions?
Yeah, sure.
So then I had some questions around the data collection and the service called, was it Granicus or something?
Yeah, the service is called Host Compliance. They have been purchased by a company called Granicus, yes.
Right, whose, mission on their webpage, gain revenue with short-term rental compliance, things of that nature, other things that they say are similar to that. So you get the data, my understanding, and looking at some of the, what the various platforms that offer, that you can list a housing to, what kind of data do you get? I believe you get rental income, you get occupancy rates. Who gets that data? Who's it shared with from a data privacy perspective? So one of the things that we looked at and asked Airbnb and VRBO is, that's, our view, that we had no idea or thought that they would be sharing that type of data. Certainly they are sharing that data with the state of Vermont or the state of Massachusetts, wherever it is that you're generating rental income, and they issue you a tax form that you have to file, right, showing your income. But what are the thoughts around when you subscribe to this service? Who's going to have access to it? What data fields are you going to get, and what are you going to do with it? Which is what you asked me. Yeah, okay.
Well, again, I will just say from my previous experience that what you get from the company is they will match an ad that appears on a host platform with an entry on the grand list so that you know exactly who that person is. In complete candor, in answer to your question, any information the town has is public information.
To this service that's going to provide data that you have access to, what data fields those are, and to the extent that you can exclude the ones, some of the ones that I discussed, that, that's certainly would make me feel better around the whole data privacy issue and who has access to it and who needs to know what, right? I would argue a lot of that's private information.
Yeah, I mean, I keep referring to my experience in Killington. Those questions got asked, but the select board never really dealt with it, but I think we could in this case. Again, it's not my personal desire that we'd have a lot of proprietary information.
No.
Yeah, I wouldn't think it would be much more than the data that we already have, basically, because it's ownership of the house, who to contact, and things like that. I don't think we're going to be prying into, what do you do for a living, where do you live?
I could certainly go back to the host compliance, and ask them a little bit more about this question, and I could also imagine the select board. It feels clunky to put it right in the ordinance, but I can imagine this select board just passing a simple policy that simply says we're not going to ask these questions.
That you would be filling out.
Because, again, if the town asks those questions, they become public information, and there may be some questions we just don't want to ask.
Correct. We don't tend to like to ask those types of questions because it deals with public records requests and it's not information we necessarily need to have. So.
I think, and it goes back to what's the goal of collecting the data.
Exactly. Right. Bingo.
The only thing we need the data for is to determine compliance with our request for the permit. So from my perspective, all we need to know is, are you renting your property as a short-term rental, and that's it.
Well, right, and where are you located?
Yeah,
right.
just so, Right. I mean, there is some information there, but I wouldn't think it'd be that much different than what we have on file already.
Right.
Hugh?
Yeah, I'll just say that we can certainly follow up, with Granicus to find out, what information they collect. But my belief probably is that from the meetings we had with them and the way they discussed how their software platform works, all they're really doing is they've got software that will look at all of the hosting providers. So whatever is available to the general public on either VRBO, Airbnb, Evolve, the 60 or so hosting platforms that advertise the short-term rentals, I believe the company that would be using only has access to the data that's available to the public through those sites. That's my guess. I mean, we can follow up on that, and then with that data, it gets matched to the lister's file, as Preston mentioned, so we can understand here's a property and here's who owns the property, so that the registration process can be managed.
It'd be interesting to see a form that a person would be asked to fill out, to register for this service or register with the town or however that works.
Yeah, actually, you remind me, I think that the last meeting it was asked for a form, and then it kind of slipped my mind.
I think I did too,
It wasn't deliberate. Yeah. I certainly know what we put in a form in Killington. It wouldn't be too hard for me to do the same thing, and so forgive me for not actually having that at this meeting.
Well, that's...
But I'm still thinking with Russell's question that, in terms of data mining this company could do, I would be comfortable just saying we're not going to mine lots of proprietary data. We don't want to do that.
I mean, that's, like Lee was saying, that's not our objective, right? To gather information that we really don't need. We just need a few specific things. Ownership, contact, some other basics, but that's about it.
But that relates to what Granicus will provide us. Because basically, the form that Preston is going to come up with is going to give us the information that we actually need. Granicus is going to give us information about cheaters, basically. I mean, to be blunt.
I mean, if
somebody who is not either willfully or not willfully submitting the form, that's all we're asking for is for that information.
If you look at the ordinance, it will say in order to get a registration, you have to provide these things. That's actually what the application form is going to say. I'm not really planning to put anything on it beyond what there is, but you could still see what it looked like to answer the questions.
Mr. Montgomery had.
Sir?
Thank you. Ian Montgomery. Sorry, I've lost my voice a little bit. I need to go at the bottom of my list. I've not seen a copy of the revised ordinance, and I did look on the website and I couldn't find it.
It's not up there because it's not an active ordinance yet.
Ah, thank you. So I'll take time to read that. The second thing, I was the one that asked the question about a form, and I guess I'm begging you not to make a decision until you've got a form that you can approve.
You can't make one today anyway.
Okay, thank you. That's the second thing. And then what I've been listening to is the inspections and we, you know, our little Airbnb doesn't come into this, but is there a grace period likely for people who are renting something larger than 8?
What I was trying to say, and I'll state it again, is that when you get into a rental of over 8, you have to get an inspection from the state. Well, once the state's involved, they're not going to give you an occupancy permit until you do everything that they want. So they're the ones that say what your grace period is.
But aren't we trying to bring people on board into our system? And you know, for some people.
So all I can say is that when the state inspects, they may say you're fine, so you're good for occupancy. They may say we will give you a provisional occupancy and some time to correct things. Or they may say, oh gosh, this is a disaster waiting to happen. No, you can't rent until you do it.
But what I'm saying is that, you know, in our nice freewheeling, I'm independent, I live in Vermont system of society, people do things without registering, and they plead ignorance and things like that. And you know, we need somehow to bring people on board gently, don't we? Otherwise, you're going to be like, I mean, I'm going to carry on, let me carry on. I looked at the website of Granicus, and it seemed to me like Orwellian Big Brother. Okay. I hated everything I read on that website because it wants to be totally intrusive and give to the local government even how many times I cut my toenails. Not literally, you know what I mean, but I found it really objectionable. Now, I used to live in a country where we were highly regulated. I emigrated here, so I could be free. I don't like the Granicus type people. I think they should be wiped off the face of the earth. Sorry, I do feel strongly sometimes, and sometimes I can get worked up, and you'll know it when you see it. Last question. Has there been a legal review of this yet?
No, I had stated that earlier. No, no, not yet. That's
Okay.
why they're not adopting it tonight.
Thank you. I've asked all the questions I needed to ask.
Actually, you are reminding me of one thing that I will say, and this is just me, this isn't Julie, this isn't the select board. I was envisioning that if this rolled out in, say, April,
right,
you know, that we wouldn't say everybody has to have their registration in April. We would give people like 6 months to 12 months.
Anytime there's
That's what I was
registration.
thinking.
Yeah.
But I admit this, that isn't what the bylaw actually says. So once again, I think it would have to be a policy or a protocol the select board, when they adopted the ordinance, would, you know, if they adopted the ordinance, they would say, we're going to give people 6 months or 12 months to get in the program.
No, I would agree. Any new regulation, you can't.
Ma'am?
Come up some way in the back. I can walk.
Give us your name.
Oh, thank you. I'm Dawn Princiero Brown. My husband's back there, Bobby Brown. I don't know if you guys know him. We've all been here forever. And I had a couple questions. I would guess that the application or the registration would be self-policing
For under 8, I believe it is.
for under 8. So you have to depend on people, to be honest, to go in. And my experience with this is those who are honest will do it, and those who are not won't. My second that was a comment, I'm sorry. My question is, what initiated all this? I'm sorry I missed the other meetings and didn't know it until I read it in the paper about this one. Where did this all come from?
It originally started with the Planning Commission, and it was a directive, and Hugh, maybe you could speak to this, on the genesis of this short-term rental.
Yes, thank you. Here, Hugh. Oh.
So as all of you can probably imagine, the topic of short-term rentals is in the news in every town, in every part of the country, all over the world. So it's an emerging area, and from the research we did, we found that there's a huge array of different municipalities doing all kinds of different kinds of measures to either simply register all the way through to controlling and eliminating short-term rentals as a business model. And they're doing that primarily in reaction to all of the things that people, don't feel that they like about short-term rentals. So, there's two sides to this coin, and obviously for all of the folks that are impacted by short-term rentals, they have a point of view. All the folks that operate short-term rentals, they have a point of view. But the thing you can't deny is that it's becoming more of an issue now than it was, say, 2 or 3 years ago or 5 years ago. And
an issue in what regard?
Just the number. The quantity of short-term rentals has doubled in Chester in 1 year.
And the negative of that is?
I'm not here to say whether it's a negative or a non-negative. What I'm here to say is that the genesis of this ordinance was to position Chester to understand the short-term rental landscape and put some very basic health and safety measures in place, because that's the right thing to do. This ordinance has no regulation in it of any sort.
Hugh explained the genesis of the project. If you would like to make some other comments, that's fine. Make them to the board, make them to the public, or if you have a question.
Okay, so thank you. And I don't have any problem with, by the way, what you're talking about. I'm just trying to understand where it all came from and how it's going to be implemented. And I've had both long-term rentals, I've had short-term rentals. I can tell you, and if this matters, if it does matter, my long-term rentals have typically been absolute disasters. Absolute disasters. People stay in a place for too long, and all I do is spend all the money that they may have paid me fixing it back up again. And this is after 60 years. Okay, I'm not that old. Let me change that. 45 years. And the shorter-term rentals, through vacation rental, by owner, HomeAway, B&B, tend to be very, and I don't know if anybody has any of those, but they rate you. We rate them. So when somebody comes in and they leave the place a wreck, we rate them. They can never rent a short-term rental again, probably with the rating that you give them and the comments that you make. On the other hand, if I'm a slumlord and it's a dump, they rate me. So then I would never get another rental again. Now that's how it works with those types of agencies. Those short-term rentals that come through real estate agents are very different. And oftentimes you'll find those are the rentals that have large numbers of people in a house. So I think what you're doing is really very little. I don't think the impact will be bad. The impact of the short-term rentals and the people that come here and spend money here hopefully will keep, the need for housing up, I guess, so you'll have more workers. I think it's very, very positive if done properly, and I think that's what you're all trying to do. I know in one place they charge, let me ask this, do hotels pay a tourist tax? They do, right? And I know in one place that's what they do. You pay that just like a hotel would. So right now, the taxes that when you have a short-term rental, it takes the money right out and sends it right to the state. You don't even see it, ever. It just goes right to the state. But I just wanted to make sure I kind of knew where it was coming from. Was there a big problem? Sounds like you're just trying to prevent a big problem from happening in the future. So anyway, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Good to see you. And you. And you. Oops. Who wants this?
Hold on, I'm going to let the lady behind you there who hasn't spoken yet.
Kathy Garatino. I have a different perspective because I intend to live in my house until I am taken out feet first. And I look around my neighborhood. I'm sorry to see that you are separating unhosted from hosted, because every unhosted one is an empty house. And I think we have enough now, or you could have a cap at some point. But right now, there's 2 properties for sale on my street. There's already 3 unhosted. There's 2 properties for sale and 2 more that are going to come up. Young families cannot compete with the money that comes in and buys these houses for short-term rentals. That is a business, and I've had long-term rentals. I've had tenants, and I can tell you they did trash the house, and it was awful. And it's so much easier to have vacationers come in that have to be rated and all that. But we cannot look past the fact that it is taking housing away from people who want to live here full-time. I think your idea about developing housing is excellent, but not everybody wants to rent. There are those that want to buy. And if the houses that come up for sale, the buyers, the local buyers, especially young people, have to compete with people who have more money. I have a friend right now who is renting a cottage. Her family rents a cottage. It's a nice cottage on someone's property. Their rent this year was shot through the roof. And they have been looking and looking for some place to rent. The problem, I think, is that these people realize they can get more money by turning that into a short-term rental. So it'll be very interesting to see what they do when they finally have driven these people out of the cottage. I think that the short-term rentals, they maintain their property and all that. A hosted short-term rental, the people live there full-time. So yes, you're bringing in tourists, but you still have people in the house, and they're going to go to businesses in town that tourists aren't going to go to. So I just think that without a cap and without distinguishing between hosted and unhosted, that the town is going to become vulnerable, and the housing is going to become increasingly difficult. Those housing developments, if they happen, we're not going to see them for a couple of years. And we're talking, when Josh was talking, it made me think about the fact we're looking at a $20 million bond to improve the high school, which I think we need to do. However, we only graduate between 50 and 55 kids a year. And that maybe 5 years down the road, it's going to be down to 25 because the families can't afford to live here. We're going to have a beautiful high school that we're all paying for, and there's not going to be anybody in it. Ludlow is a perfect example of that. And speaking about Killington, it's a different town. Killington is skiing. I mean, it's different. But when I talked to Killington, I was told that they have 300 fewer homesteaded properties in Killington than they had 10 years ago. And that is something we have to think about. We want people to live here. And without a cap on the number of unhosted, and you don't want them all through this. The competition would be crazy anyways for renting places. And Pat, down at the motel, she said she's going out of business. She cannot compete with the short-term rentals. So, there's different sides to this coin, and I think that it can't be taken lightly. It has a very big potential to impact the town in a negative way.
Thank you, Kathy. We have a hand up online. Nick Botig. Nick, are you there? Maybe he gave up waiting for me.
You there, Nick?
Nick?
He unmuted.
Anyone else here? Any other comments? Well, we have two different ordinances in front of us. The first one that was presented a couple of weeks ago and the revised one. The big change was for hosted and unhosted. It's going to have to be a board decision on which way they want to go with it, or whether they want to put more teeth into it, whether they're happy with it, or whether it's the old one or whether it's the new one. We're not going to be voting on it today, but I think we've had enough input and public discussion on this topic to probably proceed with it at our next meeting once there is a legal review of the document, barring the changes. And I would look to the board to see how they want to go with this, whether they want to go with the revised document, whether they want to go with the older document. And I guess the big difference was hosted and not hosted. I personally was okay with the original document being hosted and unhosted with the different fee schedules on it, because the hosted ones seemed more like a side business, whereas the unhosted ones, to me, seemed more like a business. It was more competition for a formal business, which has a lot more regulations and a lot more restrictions than what's being proposed here. And when you do a business, it is your home, and I understand that it's your home, but when you use it as a money-making business, as an entity where you don't live there, I think that changes the perspective to me. And I know there's some gray areas in between, and I see that with the people that are here, and it's a tough spot to be in, because you're a part of the community, you've been a part of the community for a long time, and you're kind of in a gray area there, and I understand that. But I look back to this document, and it's not asking that much. It's just asking for a registration, and it's asking for some information. And a lot of it's for the safety of the people that are renting, and a lot of it's also for the people in the neighborhood. So they have a place to speak, to talk, to maybe air their grievances if there's something going on. Because right now, the onus is put on a neighbor to call the police, and then there's conflict. Whereas if you're running a business and there's a problem, you have another outlet to probably address things. So that's just my thought on it, and I'd be curious about how the rest of the board would like to proceed with this also.
Well, I think I'd like to see the legal results of the legal review and the form that Preston's going to come up with.
Yep.
And then we'll deal with it at the next meeting, I guess.
Lee or Heather, any comments or concerns or questions on this?
Well, I think I agree with Lee that it'll be interesting to see what Jim Carroll has to say, and I think it's a good start. I think registering's not a problem, and we can get a lot of data and then study the issue in our town much better. So I think it's a good start.
Thank you, Heather. Lee, are you okay with this?
Yeah, I have to say as well, I think that this is a discussion that needs to happen, and we go forward with it and continue it and get our information back as we need it, and keep it on the agenda for next week as well, our next meeting as well.
What version am I sending to the legal counsel?
Which one?
Which version am I sending?
I mean, you probably could just look at them both, and we could, decide at the
Yeah.
next meeting, because
Okay.
they're so close together that
Okay.
the difference wouldn't be that much anyway. So it'll give some time for people to give feedback.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, and Julie, the reason you guys changed it to not have the definitions was because,
It was creating some confusion, because you have groups that fall halfway in the middle there, that don't live here. They're definitely second homeowners, but they're up here frequently. So maybe they rent their dwelling for, 7 weeks out of the year. There's just that middle category, and at the last meeting, you guys talked about, okay, so let's add a third category. Well, then Preston and I are thinking we could add 10 categories. It just gets confusing, because there's so many different scenarios. So in our conversation, we're saying, well, maybe we just don't distinguish between the two. We just have short-term rentals, that is defined by statute, or, and it's in the ordinance. So we just don't have hosted and unhosted. It just seemed to us as eliminating one of the issues.
Well, and if we eliminate one of the difficult issues, but we're still gathering data and we're on top of what the trend is, that's still positive, in my view.
Correct. And, well, part of it is when you eliminate that distinction, you also eliminate options down the line if you want to carry this further, because then you don't have the distinction between the two. So any regulations or any issues that might come up would have to apply equally to both, which is a big decision to make, whether that's exactly what you want, or if you want a distinction between the two different
Or
groups.
we could amend it at a later date to make that.
Right.
Correct.
You could amend it, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have a question?
Yeah, no, one more time, do you like to? Sure.
Regarding the, whether you are present or not present at your property, that's what you're talking about, and you'd like to see it, maybe that go back in, and right now it's not in there?
Well, we have two versions of it, so it's
Right,
not
so
either in or out, right?
My question is it because when people are away and then there's a problem, you have nobody to contact? Or is there something else? Because if you register, you have that information if there's a problem, right?
Right. Hugh has the answer.
I just don't understand.
I can probably address that just from the standpoint of, I think originally it was just to acknowledge that, and whether you call it hosted or unhosted, or whole home or partial home, I mean, the thing that was trying to be distinguished in the ordinance was somebody that rents their whole house and is not there during the rental time versus the person that rents a part of their house and lives there on the property. So, and in this case, because it's a registration, it really doesn't matter, because there are no regulations, there's just a registration. Down the road, I think if there were regulations, then maybe hosted and unhosted would have to be reintroduced. So I'm guessing that as a registration point of view, it really doesn't matter from the ordinance standpoint at this moment. We included the definition just because the reality is people rent homes, whole homes, and they're not there, and people rent part of their homes and live there. So we just followed that convention in terms of creating that definition in the draft ordinance.
Basically, you're saying there's not really been a terrible problem, and if there is, you have by registration, hopefully everybody does it, which I have absolutely no problem with doing that, so, thank you.
Thank you.
No, here, you can hold it. You can hold it.
Right behind you, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
Oh, I'm sorry. It'll come right back to you.
Not to beat a dead horse, but, I did talk to 14 towns, and I found that Conway right now, New Hampshire, has been inundated with these. It came at them like a tidal wave. They weren't prepared for it. They have someone who owns 12 houses. They have Marriott buying houses. They have people in Europe buying houses sight unseen and renting these all out as short-term rentals. The community is being destroyed. Ludlow now has 93% of their houses are owned by people from out of state. They don't have a school anymore. I mean, we have to look at the worst-case scenario and be prepared not to fall into that trap. So I'm not saying everything has to be discussed and decided now, but I do think that if you don't look at what has happened in other communities, that there could be problems that are going to be very difficult to sort out down the road. When I spoke to Rockland, Maine, they had a limited number of short-term rentals, the unhosted, and they've had no problems. And now they're thinking of raising the number because they feel the community can support it. So I just think that we can't be too casual about this. There's a real threat here to the community if we do not look down the road and look at a big picture and think, what can happen if? You know, I really want to sit on my porch and see a neighbor across the street 5 years from now. You know, I think that's important. And I don't mind a few unhosted. We have that now, and it doesn't seem to disturb the community. But if there's no cap put on it, if there's no anticipation of a possible problem, then we are going to have a problem. Because it's easy money for someone that can buy a house and turn it over to an agency and have it rented, and you have someone in the local area maintaining it. You're bringing in some pretty good money. And the people that are buying houses for that purpose are denying local people the opportunity to buy that house because they can't compete with the money.
Thank you, Kathy. Russell, did you want to make one more statement?
So I had a question and a comment, but I'll ask a question first. You know, so the registration, so people are going to self-comply, so it's going to incorporate people that are just renting their homes. They're not necessarily on a platform, right? So if I'm renting my house, I have a lease with you, I've rented to you every year, that by definition has to be registered, right? If I'm deriving any income whatsoever from renting my property to somebody else, that requires registration, or only if it's on this platform that seems to be so bad?
Well, the state's definition is that you can rent up to 14 days without registering. The bylaw simply says if you are renting a short-term rental, you have to register. I think the practical point that I mentioned at our last meeting is that the way we know you're renting it is if you're advertising it. So that's all I can say.
But the other people have to self-comply. If you're renting it for more than 2 weeks, you are required, you're being asked to register, regardless of whether you're on a platform or not.
Well, that's what the bylaw would, that's what the ordinance would say, yeah.
Well, that's also the state requirement.
It is, yeah.
We're not going to enforce your compliance with state regulations. That has nothing to do with us. But if you're renting your house out, then, and you're falling under those state requirements, then if the state catches you and you haven't done that, then you could be liable to, and it's not us.
From the state's point of view, you're supposed to pay a rooms and meals tax.
Right.
Yeah.
And the platforms collect that, right?
And the platforms collect that.
If you do it off the books,
yeah,
then you as a landlord, you need to collect it and either pay it yourself out of the net income or add an incremental click charge to your renter. So,
Mr. Roper, you have a question?
Thanks, Arnie. No, I just have a comment. Maybe recenter this a little bit. The gist of the proposed ordinance is to gather data. And a very important data point is to understand how many of short-term rentals are hosted by people who live here in Chester versus how many are unhosted. And to Kathy's point, one of the things that we would want to watch for as we collect data would be an entity or an individual who is suddenly buying a lot of homes in Chester and taking them out of the long-term rental market and not living here and not contributing to our community. So I would strongly urge that we keep the hosted and unhosted definitions in the proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. So I think I kind of know our direction.
So I'm going to send both versions to Jim for review. Preston is going to work on a form. We're going to clarify, nail down what data we would be collecting, and we're going to add some language about phasing in for a grace period during the initial startup.
Sounds good.
Okay. We have our orders.
Thank you, Julie.
Yep.
And thanks from the Planning Commission for being at yet another meeting, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks, maybe. Thank you, everyone, for coming and offering your comments and your concerns. We appreciate it. Oh, yeah. So taking a breather.
Oh, no, okay. You're welcome. Okay. Are we taking a break?
No, I'm just stretching my legs.
Oh.
It takes a while to get up. I used to be able to jump out of bed in the morning and just take off.
The constable appointment and a vendor permit, and then new business.
What's these folks called?
A vendor permit at Mediterranean, she wants to bring in a food cart for one this weekend. That's it. Nothing exciting. Should only take a minute.
Folks, take it outside, please.
Sorry. Okay.
All right. Next item on our agenda is appointment of a constable. Julie, can you help us out on this? I think it's
Sure,
Jeff Holden that's going to be appointed the constable.
We're reappointing Jeff. Jeff was the town constable for years, got on the select board, so he couldn't hold the position of constable. So it's kind of a pain for Adam because he lives in Springfield. There's a whole thing. So we're looking to reappoint Jeff as constable. And reminder.
You need a motion on this one.
You do need a motion on this one, yes.
So I'll make a motion to recommend or appoint Jeff Holden as town constable.
I second it.
So Lee's the motion and Heather's the second. Any discussion? Any comments?
Thank you, Jeff.
This is basically to serve.
It's any time of service of process, that's primarily.
Arnie, Tim Roper has his hand up.
Tim, is it regarding this issue or is your hand up from before?
It went back down.
All right, I put it down, my bad.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion to appoint Jeff Holden as our town constable, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Nobody opposed? All set. A little housekeeping, we have a vendor permit for Mediterranean, and it's regarding I guess a food truck?
You did this earlier for them this year. There was a food truck that they brought on in front of their property for one day. It was very successful, and they would like to do it again for October 21st, which is this coming Friday, from 4 to 7.
Great. I'm glad it was a success for him. Do you know which truck it is?
Oh, Amy's on there. Amy, what's the name of it, hon?
Amy, are you?
It's Sunnyside Taqueria.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
My son will be thrilled.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, right, it's awesome.
So you don't need a motion, but there is something to sign. If Heather or Lee, if one of you could stop in tomorrow and sign that.
I'll be in.
Thank you.
I'll be in.
Thank you.
Julie.
Thank you.
Looks like it's approved, Amy.
Thank you so much.
What time does it start?
4 p.m., 4 to 7.
4 to 7.
Okay.
Thank you all.
You're welcome.
Oh, that's right. All the diehards, all the hardcore ones are left. Future agenda items, new business. I know, Julie, you had I guess our budgets are coming up?
So budgets, you'll see the first draft of the budget next meeting. You will also see the department heads and I, we're doing it a little bit different this year, we are developing 5-year work plans. And so they have prepared their 5-year work plan of projects that they know are coming, desires that they have, and then focusing, fine-tuning, prioritizing as what are their top priorities for 2023. And the budget is being built that way. Instead of being more reactive, we're trying to be proactive. Here is our 2, 3, 4 projects by department, and that is what is feeding the budget, keeping it reasonable, obviously. You will also have the next meeting, it will not be the personnel policy, but there is a request that I'm going to ask a specific topic for health insurance that I would like to get approved at the next meeting. We're starting the, I'll just give you a preface right at the moment. I am looking to start the division of new hires over the next 5 years. We have several of our long-standing employees who are eligible to retire and likely will be. So looking to fade out of the 100% insurance that we currently offer. We all know that that is not sustainable for a lot more years. So starting to phase in for new hires that there's a contribution. And by estimation, we would be phased out of 100% insurance for the most part in probably 5 to 7 years. So I would like to get that. It is a contribution. It is not a tremendous contribution because we need to also remain competitive in this current market, and it opens the door. But it's a start. And we have some people leaving and new hires coming, so instead of waiting for the personnel policy, which is being reviewed, but there's a lot to the policy, I would like to get this piece approved by the board so that I can do an addendum to the existing policy and have this in effect. So that will be at you officially, now that I've told you everything, that'll be to you officially for the next meeting. And then in December, Ted Brady, who is the executive director of Vermont League of Cities and Towns, has a goal of touring every select board in the state of Vermont. And so we have invited him to Chester. He is just going to come talk about the league, talk about some of the things that we are working on up there, and some of the policies that we have established, the board established this year, which I was a part of. Ted Brady. So he used to be the Deputy Commissioner of Economic Development for the state. He's now the Executive Director of VLCT. So he'll be here in December to talk to you all.
And I believe the high school would probably want to be with us.
And the high
again in
school,
2
yes, I
weeks.
have a note that they will be on the agenda.
Short-term rentals again.
Do you want me to put it back on if Jim hasn't reviewed them yet?
No, it only makes sense.
So once Jim is reviewed, I'll put it back on. I'm hoping it would be by the next meeting, but in case, you know. And then I will work on the lease.
Oh, the lease.
I don't know. I mean, I'll try to have that. I have some. So I would think I could have that for the next agenda.
What about the housing committee? How are we going to work this?
So the housing committee, my thoughts are, and I'm going to get with Preston, we have a few ideas. I don't want just anybody that volunteers. It needs to be a committee of people who are skilled in different facets of housing. And not a committee of 9, like I'm thinking a committee of 5. And maybe Preston and I are not members. Maybe we just participate with the housing. Like, those are the things we want to think through. Right. But, you need to have a finance person, a part of that. You need to have, maybe it's a contractor, a developer. What do we have available to us in this town for people that have moved in, that we're not aware of? There's a lot of skills and talents in this town that are
Maybe
untapped.
work on that with Preston as far as.
Preston and I, correct. That's what we'll be coming back to you with, yes.
Does any board member have any suggestions or ideas that they would like for future agenda items? Go ahead, Lou.
I was just looking at what we had in our packet this time around on routes 57 and 61 proposal. Is that going to be on a future agenda?
I think.
No, they brought that up during citizens' comments, Lee? He did.
I'm sorry. I was having trouble hooking on. Maybe I missed that.
Yeah,
That was right. That was
Okay.
right in the beginning under citizens' comments. He just basically gave us an update on the changes of the routes and stuff.
Okay. Yeah, it was pretty clear when I went through it. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to have it. Good.
I think you were having all kinds of static on your end on the computer there for a while.
Yeah, I was having a really hard time with the Zoom, so I have to go work on that.
All right, anything else from any board members for future agenda items?
Not at this time.
I do
Okay.
have a new business for you.
New business?
I do have one, very quick.
What's that?
I just want to let you know that our, as you may or may not know, our fire department has a swiftwater rescue team.
Yes.
Yes, so our swiftwater rescue team has been selected by the state of Vermont to be a part of the state of Vermont USAR team, which is, don't ask me what it stands for, but it's some kind of state rescue program. And so what that means is if there is a flood or swiftwater event, our team would get called to respond to other sites in assisting the state. So the benefit to us is that we then are reimbursed for labor hours and equipment usage by the state. And if any of our equipment is damaged, it's paid for by the USAR team. And they also will inspect our equipment, and if there are repairs or improvements that need to be made, the state USAR program pays for that. Wow. So it's a great recognition. We've developed a really good team. They've been recognized by the state, and this could get us some revenue in if they are called out. So.
Get them some
You
experience.
know, have had a program like this for quite some time, especially when Irene came.
Yes.
And all the flooding happened.
Yes.
And what the great rescues our rescue team were able to do.
Yep.
I remember that so clearly.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so just a little positive
Feather in the cap
for
for
us.
sure, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
Good.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Everybody was quick.
Everybody. Everybody.
Second.
All those-
Did I get to be first on that one?
Yeah, you can have it first, Heather.
Thank you.
And then Lee was second. And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Yahoo.
Aye.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all very much.
Recording stopped.
I know. There is, don't forget to sign the warrant.